Good evening. Welcome to the September meeting of Maury County Board of Education, School Board. Let's begin the meeting with roll call.
Ms. Parker? Ms. Kinzer?
Here.
Ms. Hopkins? Mr. Fulbright? Ms. Moore is present. Ms. Irvin?
Here.
Mr. Sims?
Here.
Mr. Hooper?
Here.
Mr. Howell?
Here.
Mr. Lindsay?
Here.
Mr. Dudley? That is 10 present. We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Won't you stand with me and pledge of allegiance, and then we'll have a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and you may be seated. The next order of business is to honor our outgoing board members, and I believe one is here, right? Denny Beaver, won't you come forward? We're going to go down. Let me say this about Denny. Denny has been the best board member, 8 years. That's a long time. We should honor his wife, too. And we're going to miss you. I don't know of anybody that you should have been. He's a sleuth. He gets to the bottom of it. He finds the truth. He listens. He's available, and we appreciate it. And he's a great driver.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, and we do have this for you. In appreciation for their dedication and service to the students and employee of Maury County Schools, Denny Beaver. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Is it black? Now, go ahead and make a speech. You've only got 3 minutes.
I'm not a speaker.
And next on the agenda is to install the new board members, the 5 board members that were elected, new, old, and in between. Mayor Arbor? If y'all will come forward. Marlena Irwin, Austin Hooper, Wayne Lindsay, Betty Kinder, and Michael Fulbright.
I was already sworn in.
Gotta get you together.
Official, huh? It's hot, wherever you want to move it to. No, that's good. All right, well, congratulations, I think. Stepping into public office has its challenges, also has its rewards. And so just trust God, listen to your constituents, and just always try to do the right thing for the right reason. So we'll say this, we'll say I, then you'll state your name, and then we can cheat with this. We have it on the screen there. So I do solemnly swear, we can just say it together, that I on behalf of Maury County, you're sworn in.
Okay, the next order, oh, what is that? Oh, thank you. It's for sure we're sworn in. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Hickman, so we can have an election of officers. Excuse me, I always forget to adopt the agenda. It's just my thing. So, there's been a motion to adopt. Is there a second, Mr. Lindsay? No, Mr. Howell? Correct? All right. Any discussion? Mr. Lindsay?
Can we take out under 13.3, Budget Amendment 10007? Can we vote on that by itself?
Yes, we'll put it, can we put it down here under new business of the, with those budget amendments? The first budget amendment. 1310-007. Okay, then we're ready to vote. And that motion does pass. Okay, now, Ms. Hickman, the floor is yours.
At this time, I will be taking nominations for the board chair. Mr. Howell. Any other nominations?
I nominate Michael Fulbright.
Do we have any other nominations for board chair? I see none, so at this time we will take a voice vote. And I will start with, once again, our two nominations are Betty Kinzer and Michael Fulbright. And at this time I will take a voice vote, starting with Kristen Parker. Betty Kinzer.
Kinzer.
Natasha Hopkins. Michael Fulbright. David Moore. Marlena Irvin. Will Sims. Austin Hooper. Chad Howell. Wayne Lindsay. At this time I have a vote 6-4, 6 votes for Michael Fulbright, 4 votes for Betty Kinzer. Our new board chair will be Michael Fulbright.
Why don't you just, we'll change it up next time. Okay. But you can have my gavel.
I love a gavel. I wore mine out for county commission.
You want it?
No, keep it.
Only new?
It's on you for the assistant.
Well, I want to take the time to thank Mrs. Kinzer for her leadership over the years, and I've learned a tremendous amount by watching you, and hope to continue the good work that you've been doing. So thank you for your service. And I am very open to being corrected when you see I'm doing something wrong, so yell loud. At this time, we'll move to the election of board chair. Is there a nomination for the vice chair position? Okay. Is that who you were gonna?
Yes.
Okay. So we have Ms. Kinzer nominated for vice chair. Are there any other nominations for the position of vice chair? Seeing none, if we'll just have a vote of acclamation to have Ms. Kinzer be our new vice chair. All those in favor? Oh, take a voice vote, or should we do it? Voice vote fine? Okay. Voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Congratulations. I was not giving you that opportunity. It sounded unanimous. Item number 6 on our agenda, election of Chair Pro Tem. Is there a nomination for the Chair Pro Tem for the board? Ms. Kinzer.
I nominate Chad Howell.
Mr. Howell. Are there any other nominations for the position of Pro Tem? Seeing none, we will vote by acclamation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, it's unanimous. Mr. Howell, you have the new position of Chair Pro Tem. Item number 7 on the agenda, election of TLN representative. Can we, for the new folks, can we get a description of what this position actually entails?
What they do is look at what's going on in the legislature, stay in touch with TSVA about those type of things, go to the legislative meeting and so forth. So
Okay.
keep us abreast of it.
Sounds like a very good responsibility. I know that there's actually some items coming up in the legislature we need to be on top of. Are there any nominations for that position?
I nominate Wayne Lindsay.
Mr. Lindsay? Are you willing to serve in that role? All right. Are there any other nominations for the position of legislative representative? Seeing none, all those in favor of Wayne Lindsay taking this position, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is unanimous. Item number 8, sick leave bank trustee for 2020 through 2022.
I think that Ms. Hopkins is serving a 3-year term, correct, from last year, so we have to elect somebody else. We need one more person. I nominate Marlena Irvin.
Okay. Ms. Irvin? Okay. Any other nominations for the position? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations. Item number 9, we move to recognition and announcements. Cowboy up. You're up.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman Fulbright and Superintendent Hickman. I'm not on. Hang on. Thank you, Chairman Fulbright, Superintendent Mr. Hickman, and members of the board for the opportunity to speak to you tonight on behalf of Cowboy Up and September being Suicide Prevention Month. I know that some of you have heard of us before and seen our presentation before, but you might notice that we now have a brand new logo that is our very own, that we are very proud of. Cowboy Up is a message of suicide prevention, awareness, education, and hope. And we have been blessed since 2005 to have presented to over 16,000 7th grade students right here in the Maury County Public School System. Over 48,000 people died by suicide in 2018 in the United States. On any given day in Tennessee, we lose up to 3 lives to suicide, and it is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24. But why do we do what we do? Because it is the number one preventable cause of death. How do we make a difference? Together. Together is how we make a difference. This month is Suicide Awareness Month. For Cowboyette, we call it Light Up the Darkness. We've already had several events this month. We've been supported by the Maury County School System. We have lots more coming up. This Thursday, we'll have Porch Light Night, where people will turn on their porch light and post that on social media. It's actually not September the 19th, but September the 24th. We are partnering with Columbia State and having a Light Up the Darkness community drive. On September 25th, we are having Cowboyette Shirts and Awareness Day. We believe that our shirts create a lot of awareness for our community. And on September the 30th, we are encouraging people to post the hotline. And I have to say that Cowboyette started right here, with me standing right in this spot 16 years ago. And so it's kind of always an emotional night for me to come back and to share with you what we have accomplished together throughout the years. This is a room that was at the local Boys and Girls Club, and now this is the teen room. And this is because folks came together in the community and helped us raise $15,000 for the Maury County Boys and Girls Club. It's more than a room to us. We go there once a month and build relationships with the students there. We have been blessed that we have a song that has been written for us. It was written by Mr. Fred Foster and Roger Brown. And so you will see many of these signs at our local schools. There's a Lot to Live For is the name of our song. This is a sticker that is actually on all of the school buses in the Maury County school system. This was actually one of the bus drivers' ideas, Donna Van Rosenberg. So we applaud her for coming up with that amazing idea. We are super proud to say that we finally, after 16 years, have an office at 604 North High Street. And I can tell you that this office has already helped students who have been in the Maury County school system who are now facing grief because of the loss of a loved one. And they have remembered that Cowboyette was there for them in the 7th grade, and now they are there for them in this way as well. I know that several of you have not heard the story of Cowboyette, and so I'm going to share that with you tonight. It started because of a young man that grew up on a farm in Culleoka. He had 3 older brothers and a younger sister. He could play the guitar and the drums all by ear. And when he was in high school, he received the highest FFA degree that you can receive, which is the American Farmer degree. He graduated from MTSU with a degree in agriculture business, and he enjoyed being an uncle to his nieces. Along about the time that he graduated from college, he went through a difficult time, and on the back of his pickup truck, he put the expression Cowboyette. It actually came from the movie 8 Seconds. And 99.9% of the time, that's the way he lived his life, until June 14th, 2003. He took his life. And the reason that I know that story so well is because Marcus was my youngest brother. And so when that happened, I went to my dad, who was a teacher at Culleoka for 40 years. He taught agriculture. And I remember very well asking him for kind of permission to do this project. And I'll never forget what he said. He had great big hands, and he held up one finger. And he said, if you can help one child or one family, then go do it. And no matter what we do, that is what we always come back to. Through the years, we've been able to honor people as Cowboyette heroes, people that maybe have faced difficult times, or people that always just seem to have a positive attitude. And some of those folks are with me tonight in this very audience. And so I just wanted to say, if you are a Cowboyette hero, would you please stand and remain standing at this time, Mr. Gaines? And please remain standing. Cowboyette is nothing that Regina Perry has done. It is a group of everybody coming together for this cause. But I have a great group of folks that I call my Cowboyette sisters, and several of them are here tonight. Would you please stand and remain standing? We are blessed to have Mary Ann Christian with us tonight, who represents TSPN, and TSPN and the Jason Foundation have been great friends of ours through the years. Mary Ann is already standing in the back, if you would wave. And if we have any school counselors in the room, if you would please stand. If you have served on the school board and approved Cowboy over the years, would you please stand and remain standing? Miss Yvette Carter is in the back. She is one of our new, well, not really new, but kind of new to us, Supervisor of School Counseling and Mental Health. Would you please wave because you're standing? Yes. And when I started Cowboy Up, I was a teacher at McDowell Elementary. And over the years, my family at McDowell have supported me. So if you were at McDowell when I was there and have supported Cowboy Up, would you please stand at this time? And if you have ever been, yep, Miss Myers is standing, so she got it. If you have ever worn a Cowboy Up shirt, or liked our Cowboy Up page, or liked a Twitter post, would you please stand at this time? And if you have listened to me for the past few minutes, would you please stand at this time? I hope you're standing. So I think what this says is that we will not be silent in the Maury County Public School System. We haven't been silent for the past 16 years, and we're going to keep doing what we do. We're going to keep doing everything that we can to help one child or one family, because we never know where that one child or one family might be. You may be seated at this time. And so from the bottom of my heart tonight, I just want to say thank you for your continued support of Cowboy Up, and thank you to all of y'all who continue to support it as well. And if you have any questions, usually I run off, but I remember tonight, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at this time.
I don't see any questions, but I definitely, yes. Definitely want to thank you for spearheading such an important program, and just from the little bit I know of the needs of teens in our community, you are hitting a huge need, and we're very proud to have you as a part of our Maury County School family. So thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll turn the floor over to our representative from the Maury County Education Association.
I want to thank Ms. Perry for what she does for Maury County School and students. It's really important, and especially right now, coming back to school after being off for so long, we're seeing a lot of those issues in our school. Chair Kinzer, Mr. Hickman, and board members, thank you as always for giving Maury County Education Association a voice during board meetings and hearing us through emails, phone calls, and occasional social media exchanges. I would like to welcome the new board members and introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Inc., President of the Maury County Education Association, which is a local affiliate of the Tennessee Education Association and the National Education Association, the largest organization that works in concert at the local, state, and national levels on behalf of public education employees, schools, and students. We have worked really hard this past year to create a positive working relationship with the board and central office, and I look forward to continuing those efforts. We are almost exactly 1 month in with students, and to say it has been a labor of love would be a huge understatement. It has been laborious. As I have told my students in my 25th year of teaching, I am again a first-year teacher. Many teachers are putting in insurmountable hours in preparing, planning, checking technology, and communicating at all kinds of times with parents and students. They are doing this under exceptional stressors such as concerns about COVID protocols, student staff issues with technology, and continued scrutiny over how remote learning and teaching is actually happening. I can say I am in awe of what our teachers and staff are doing to overcome these issues and their dedication, despite some of the challenges they face. I would like to share some of the concerns that were addressed at our recent representative meeting, as well as just overall concerns. Staffing is a concern, partly because of people being out and the lack of substitute teachers. Like most districts, we are struggling recruiting substitutes. How can we increase that? The loss of staff when COVID hits. Assistants and nurses. What more can be said about the need of nurses in our schools? This was a need prior to COVID-19, and schools don't always have available staffing to juggle things when a student presents with symptoms. It often takes other individuals out of their role to support tracing and communicating to parents. We must find a way to increase our nursing staff. And I know this is not news to you all, as it has been discussed at great length. I feel it is important that Maury County Education Association supports this as a need for our schools and students and speaks out in favor of an increase in nurses. Another concern is cleaning. Teachers are concerned that there remains to be no deep cleaning in the schools at the end of days or weeks. Basically, a sweep and trash takeout is all that is occurring in some of the schools. There is still much confusion about essential versus non-essential statuses, basically because of the governor's release of what an essential employee must, what a school system must have in order to create essential employees, including a mask mandate for students over their third grade. Remote and in-person classes happening at the same time is a constant and continual struggle in several schools. And finally, we're concerned for McDowell employees. What is the plan for teachers and other school employees currently employed at McDowell? Should the board choose to close the doors at the end of the year? Is there a plan laid out for what it will look like for employees if students are transitioned to other schools? Can they be guaranteed job security? This year is a challenge for everyone, from our amazing cafeteria workers to the bus drivers, from our support staff to professional staff. Everyone in this district is rising to those challenges, including our families. I hope this is remembered as we move forward with hopefully a little more revenue than we thought we would have, and how we can more adequately compensate all of our employees going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. At this time, if there's somebody could bring the sign-in sheet from the back. Here it comes, I believe. Eddie, do we take all these now, or do we do them when the item comes up on the agenda? Okay, it's 3 or 5 minutes? 3 minutes. Okay, we have quite a few folks signed up. And I do appreciate everybody putting what you're here to speak on. As I call your name, I'd like you to come forward, share your thoughts. You're going to have 3 minutes to speak on your topic. All of these topics, I believe, are on the agenda. For Ms. Peterson, where you at? Battle Creek Middle School? What topic for Battle Creek? Okay, thank you. Yeah. Oh, keeping time. Yeah, either that or I've got my phone right there. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folks signed up to speak about McDowell. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I will say if somebody's made your point ahead of you, you can consolidate what you have to say and just refer back to them as well. We definitely want to hear what you have to say, though. We don't want to discount anybody's opinion. So with that being said, we'll start with the public delegation. Mr. Anderson, if you could come forward. You have indicated you'd like to speak on the nursing situation. If you could give your address and if you know the name of your school board member, that would be great too.
Chandler Anderson, 127 Creekside Drive. Mr. Fulbright's my representative, but if I curse, David Moore is. So, just before we get started. So, you know, I would like to say this. It's about time we have this discussion because we've needed a nurse in every school since I was in school, and it's a shame we don't have that. It's a shame we have rolling chairs and computers and things like that, but we don't have a nurse in every school. And I think I'm qualified to talk on that because, number one, I am a nurse. Number two, I'm a business owner. Number three, I'm a parent of 3 kids in the public school system, one of which who has asthma and Asperger's. All 3 take ADD meds. Let me tell you about what the nurses do here, if I can. The nurses in this school, and the schools that actually have nurses, are dealing with nebulizers for kids with asthma. They're making decisions about whether these kids need to go to the hospital. They're trying to track parents down. They're trying to manage these kids. And when there's not a nurse there, that pulls a teacher out of a classroom to deal with that. Last year, I had a kid that was my patient, came to me as a new patient down in Santa Fe, and because the nurse there was so good, that kid was misdiagnosed with asthma by a pulmonologist. What that kid actually had was reflux after he ate lunch and went to PE. That kid was on 4 different asthma meds, and now he's on none. And it's solely because of the nurse at Santa Fe. So I know when we start talking about putting a nurse at every school, I know the finance director and Andy and everybody probably gets a little nervous because you think, oh my God, it's got to be an RN at every school. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be that. My kids go to Whitthorne, they go to Central. There's Baker, I think, right there beside it. We can do a team approach. You can have an RN and an LPN and an MA. That's what we do at my office. We do just fine. And when you talk about what's the role of the RN, what's the role of the LPN, what's the role of the MA, well, what you got to do is look at the people who do the job every day and ask them what the role is. And that's where we've woefully fallen short. Because I can promise you this, I've diagnosed, we hit 250 positive COVIDs out of my office this week. A lot of those have been teachers. If these nurses back here had input into our reopening plan, we would be wearing N95 masks instead of these cloth things that do absolutely nothing. How many of y'all taking care of TB patients? What do you wear? Every single staff member in the school system should have an N95 mask. And you'll stop seeing positives that are required at school. And I can tell you that because you know how many of my staff members have gotten COVID? 0. Because we all wear an N95 mask. Now let me tell you other reasons than COVID, because we needed teachers. I'm hurt. Oh, my time's up already? All right. As a provider, I'll say this. I have a daughter that has ADD. Last year, we wanted to move her provider to Adderall in the morning and at noon. We couldn't do that because Central's nurse had to go cover Baker at noon. So it's more impact than just COVID. You're impacting what we can prescribe kids. You're impacting what happens in an emergency, because our teachers are wonderful, but they don't need to be managing an emergency. And if we look at it as a team approach where we don't do every single nurse as an RN, we can afford to put RNs, LPNs, and MAs as a team approach, and we can give the kids what they need, and that's a healthcare team to help take care of them while they're at school. And we got to get N95 masks for our teachers and staff, or we're going to keep having substitute problems, because they're going to keep being positive.
Thank you very much for your input.
No problem.
Ms. Peterson, if you could state your address, your district if you know it, and your topic, obviously, and name.
My name is Chair Peterson.
Pull it down.
And
Pull it down just a little bit towards you. There you go.
what? I'm short. What? That's okay. I don't know for sure who my district is, but I am with Battle Creek Middle. I believe it's David Moore. I am coming as a parent of a student that uses his nurse every day. And the reason I am here is because without her, I would be a nervous wreck every day. My son is a type 1 diabetic. He is constantly monitored by a Dexcom G6, which gives me the ability to see where he's at all day long. My concern is what happens when he goes into a diabetic episode and I don't have a nurse there for him. Would you know what to do if a type 1 diabetic was 45? Do you know what that is? Okay. Do you know what would happen if he was 300? Okay. My concern is that my child could be on the floor, and the emergency response team is wonderful, and I'm sure that they all know basic first aid, but if my kid is in a diabetic seizure and needs a glucagon inhaler, would you know what to do with that? I kind of went off of my speech I had performed, but with everything that's going on, our wonderful school nurse is drawn so tight and pulled in so many directions that I hope that she doesn't get burnt out, because we use her every day. I try not to bug her because I know she's so busy, but she contacts me if he is above 250, and that's a big thing, because if he's at 250, he's not getting anything out of school. So she's there, she's with him, she's pulling her own self out of where she should be so she can be with him. And knowing that she's at 2 different schools, I kind of count the hours until she's back at our school. So he's only 1 year into being diabetic, so I'm probably a nervous wreck. I'm so lucky to have a type 1 diabetic in the household already of 30 years, but that still doesn't mean that the mother is a type 1 diabetic. So just, I guess, you did a wonderful job of explaining why we need them, and I'm just a mom here to support that. I would appreciate it if that went through and we got more nurses support in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Christian, are you still here? Did she leave? Okay. Dr. Osborne. If you could state your address, your district if you know it, and your topic.
Address 411 Lake Circle, Columbia, Tennessee. My district will be with Miss Marlene Irvin. I think that is correct. My topic is McDowell Elementary School, as it was the last time I spoke here. I have a question first, because it would probably determine the comments that I make. Has there been a vote to close McDowell School?
No.
So my first question is, why was it in the newspaper from Mr. David Moore's comments? I think it was your comments in the newspaper that McDowell was being closed. And if I understand correctly, if the conversation has already been had that McDowell is being closed, that is a violation of the Sunshine Law of the school board. That was in the newspaper, whether it's right or wrong, that was in the Daily Herald. Also, tonight was parent-teacher conference across the district, which I thought it was sort of irresponsible of the board to have a meeting tonight about closing the school on a parent-teacher conference night, so you had to have people decide whether or not they were going to be here or there. And I do understand there was some leeway given to allow McDowell teachers to be here, and I do thank them for choosing to be here. But it also creates an extra burden for them to also have to take another night out of their livelihood, their schedule, and their family to finish those parent-teacher conferences, because I'm sure that they are dedicated teachers just like the rest of the staff that works in Murray County Schools. So I thought the meeting should have been postponed, or this topic should have been moved to a different meeting. When I started looking at your statistics for your schools, I'm looking at McDowell, and on your 10-year projection, you had 371 students. So, and you had 308 right now, 5-year was 439, 10 years 551. They have a 15-to-1 ratio right now. That would give them 83% utilization. Right now, 118 in 5 years, 149% in 10 years. If you look at Santa Fe, the 10-year population estimate was you had like 809, but then you went back and you did the little thing. You said they have 579 right now, 5-year 515, 10 years 466, which they have a 15-to-1, which means their building utilization will be 70% right now, 62% in 5 years, 56% in 10 years. You're comparing 56% at Santa Fe to 149 at McDowell. Hampshire, you have 384 now, 5 years you predicted 489, 10 years you predicted 441. Currently at a 65% utilization, going to move to an 83 and then drop to a 75%. And they are currently at a 12-to-1 student-teacher ratio. So when you start looking at all those dynamics, is this the school that we should be looking at closing? I don't know. Maybe we should also be looking at some of these other schools, because I'm not here to promote closing anybody's school, but I'm definitely not in favor of closing McDowell. But some of the other dynamics that are at these other schools should be looked at prior to you deciding, let's close McDowell, when you have in your own utilization thing that it will be at 149%, which is more. So I'm just putting that out there. So if I looked at the timeline, like March 27, I think that was the meeting I was here, 2018.
That's time, just go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, 2018, you talked about, that was when you had a vote about the budget, then you had some architecture fees in September 2018, November 2018, you did a jail thing. And so what my biggest concern is, you have led us along all the way up until this point, until June 27, when the county commission tabled it based on the referendum, and nobody has taken this back to the county commission to see if they would fund McDowell School. I've already asked them, did you bring it back? Nobody took it back. The referendum was passed, so that means the money has been coming in to do this. And on another occasion, they talked about the property when you guys were looking at taking in the property that was needed to build McDowell. And again, you guys did not go back to the county commission and follow up. So my other question is, one, who is responsible for going to county commission to make sure these things are being done that you guys are voting on? And second, I've already asked about the money. The money is there on the line item if you guys were going back to the county commission. Now stop right there, but the money is there, and somebody needs to follow up and do their job. Thank you.
I just want to, normally when we do public comments, there's not going to be any rebuttal, but I feel the need to clarify just a few things that were mentioned. Our friends at the Daily Herald do a great job, but always go by the minutes of the meeting. There has been no vote and no discussion, decision made anyway. The reason this meeting fell on tonight is because of Labor Day yesterday.
I understand that.
And the sales tax referendum was never project specific, even though that was
in the notes, the county commission, it is very specific.
I've got the resolution. It never mentions a project.
Okay, we can see each other after meeting. I can show you that.
Yeah. I mean, we've had that discussion, and thank you. All right, Dr. Martin.
Good morning. I wanted to get your attention. We all know that it's late in the day. Good evening, everyone, and I'm excited to be here recognizing your director, Mr. Hickman, Mr. Fulbright, newly elected board chair, and all of this illustrious board. I'm here tonight to speak on McDowell School. Oh. I'm Krista Martin. I live at 2119 Polk Drive, P-O-L-K, here in Columbia, Tennessee. I am very passionate about schools, especially Maury County schools, because you're the biggest feeder into the Columbia State Community College, where I've worked for 40-some-odd years. It is important for me to share with you tonight that I have been led down a path to believe that this school board and this Maury County Commission was going to build a new McDowell School. And it was also going to expand and renovate Spring Hill High School. And these things were communicated to me as I was told to vote for schools. And since I'm an educator and in education at Columbia State, I certainly support our schools. I want to share with you that not this school board, but school boards in the past have a history of closing schools within the city limits of the city of Columbia. I want you to know that I cannot understand why, when things happen with the budget and things happen with financial concerns, the schools that are closed in Columbia, Spring Hill, Maury County, Mount Pleasant happen to be in the corporate city limits of the city of Columbia. Let me share something with you. This stuff started back in the 60s and the 50s when Andrews School, maybe the 50s and the 40s, was closed on Glade Street, a school in the internal city of Columbia. Now it's the maintenance garage. Macedonia School off of West 4th Street was closed. And now we remember and reflect on College Hill Elementary School. It was a high school. It became an elementary school. It was ran by a super dynamic short man called Mr. Horace Oliver Porter. He loved education, and so did his wife. And I dare say he did not think that College Hill Elementary School was going to end up being the place that it is today, because he was about teaching our young folk in the halls upstairs, and I attended this school. In 1968, 69, we closed Carver Smith, and we bused those people over to Columbia Central High School and other places. This is not what the principal at that school had in mind. This is not what Velma Rainwright and Coach Robinson and all those folks did to academically prepare the kids who went to that school for life after high school. Now, we are looking at closing McDowell School, perpetuating a closing of the schools inside the city limits of the city of Columbia. I don't understand why. It is my understanding that the BEP has some options for schools. I would like to know what the plan is. Can we have a magnet school inside the city limits of the city of Columbia? Can we have a special school district inside the city limits of the city of Columbia? All of these things should be on the table to be discussed before we start thinking about and talking about closing schools. It looks like East Columbia gets our schools closed, i.e., Ms. Hopkins, the 3rd Ward. How much time do I have? 1 minute. I'm getting close. I better hurry fast. Okay. So I heard we were going to merge McDowell and Baker, and that was put out the window. I heard that there's some conversation about where we will build a new school if we don't build a school where McDowell is right now, which is what somebody promised me. I understand that they're looking at property out off of Lyon Parkway, looking at property off of Hampshire Pike. What about property inside the city limits of the city of Columbia? This is not what we pay taxes for. I pay city and county taxes, school board. I own a lot of property in Murray County. I pay for education twice, and I need you guys to understand, we're done with this. We're done with it.
Thank you very much. Miss Jamila Brown. Brown? Okay, yeah, come on up. If you could state your address, your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Jamila Brown. My address is 100 Westview Drive. I'm in the 2nd District with Ms. Kinzer. I'm here to speak as a parent and about McDowell. I didn't attend McDowell. I attended Highland Park growing up as a kid, but I live down the street from McDowell. Closing that school will affect those kids tremendously, not only the kids, but the neighborhood. You have to think about it. These are elementary schools. We talk about it all the time, how this is the age where they develop social skills, building friendships. I have friends that I've been friends with since elementary. You splitting these kids up, whether they go to Baker, whether they go to Highland Park, whether they go to Riverside, that's putting more strain on the teachers and the staff that's already at those schools. I have a 7-year-old son. One thing he always talks about is going to school to be with my friends. Just imagine those kids going to school and have to find new friends. And it's no secret, bullying is bad in Marion County. So that's another pressure that the kids are going to have to face. Not only that, Marion County last year was in the bottom 5% when it came to our education. This moving those kids would affect them. It could affect their scores, their classroom, the sizes of classrooms, their learning abilities, and the people that they have grown. Because in school systems, you develop relationships with your teachers, and to learn new teachers, new ways, new habits, new students, new transportation routes, and all of that, to me, is just, it's sad, and I pray that we don't close McDowell, because I see those kids in that neighborhood every day, and they are the happiest, some of the happiest, nothing against you, Ms. Myers, because we love Highland Park. We love Highland Park. But to see those kids getting off the school bus and just running happy and stuff like that, I just ask you, please do not close McDowell. Think about the schools. If you don't think about nothing, think about the students, how it would affect them. If you don't think about nothing else, it would definitely affect the students.
Thank you very much. Bryson Leach? If you could say your name, your address, and you'll have 3 minutes to share your thoughts.
Hey, Bryson Leach, 1001 Hillcrest Avenue, Kristen's McGow. Also a future parent of a McDowell student. So, I'm I'm not much of an orator, but I did feel like 2 weeks ago after watching the school board meeting study session, and heard one member state that 8 years ago the conversation of McDowell was being had. The frustrating thing that hit me was 8 years ago I wasn't living here, though I grew up here, was born and raised here, went to Woodard, etc. The problem was 8 years ago I didn't know this was going on. The problem was I watched the study session yesterday and had zero clue what you guys were talking about as far as what made you arrive at these decisions. So I created a petition on change.org, and to this moment we have almost 2,000 signatures 2 weeks ago. And so I'm here speaking on behalf of 2,000 people, basically saying you owe us an explanation as to why suddenly the decision has been made to talk about this in the language of we need to talk about the word closure without talking about future. Let's say what I'm asking for and what we are asking for is vision. What we're asking for is hope. What we're asking for is saying, I've done my research, I've read scholarly articles and talked to professionals about what it means to close a school. But instead, during a meeting, it just sounded like it's time we talk about kicking the can down the road. And the last I checked, my son's not going to can school. It's time to talk about, we need to talk about how serious of an implication this is. I spent 10 minutes on Google and found 15 scholarly articles about what it means to close a school and what that does to a community, what that does to property values, and what that does to people who live within walking distance, like me, to the school. So this isn't necessarily about students, but it's about the fact that we need, you as a board, needs to take a little bit of time and be clear and concise and be kind and tell us why you're making the decision you're making. And with that why, talk about a vision of the future. You don't just bring a monkey to a room and say, here, fix it, and walk out. You got to say, here's the monkey, here's the problem, and here's how we're going to fix it. And so that's what I'm here before and saying, with 2,000 other people, we need an explanation, and we need vision and a hope for the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. Commissioner Barner, would you like to come up if you could tell us your name? Many of us already know you. And your address.
Good evening. My name is Talvin Marner. I live at 418 West 2nd Street here in the city of Columbia. I'm the county commission representative for this 3rd district. Prior to me becoming a county commissioner, I sat in the seats that you all are sitting in. I sat in those seats for 8 years. I've been on, and I'm beginning my 11th year on the county commission. And I'm a little bit confused this evening. I don't understand. We've allocated money to build a new McDowell school. I don't understand why the intent of that money has been diverted or changed. I don't understand why there's talk about moving the entire population of McDowell School to another location. And I heard, but I don't know if it's true or not, but if they do move them, they're going to move them here. I can't fathom that. Back when I was on the school board, we went round and round and round about zoning. If you go forward with your initiative in regard to McDowell's future and temporarily move those students in here, you'll be busing a population in while you're busing another population out. I don't understand how that makes sense. Dr. Osborne gave you all some numbers about the student population within the school system. If I was still sitting in your seats, the first thing that I would do is look at a countywide rezoning. You know, I have 5 daughters and 17 grandchildren. 4 of my 5 daughters started school in this building when it was College Hill School. My youngest daughter started her education at McDowell School. after being, and when my older daughters, not the oldest daughter, but daughters 2, 3, and 4, when they had to leave this school, they were zoned to Riverside, which is in close proximity to where we live, but they didn't stay there long. About a year or so, they were zoned to McDowell. And in that process, they were in the process of building E.A. Cox Middle School, and my 2 younger daughters wound up going to Cox, and then by the time they got ready to go to high school, my older daughters were grandfathered into Central, and my 2 younger daughters wound up being zoned to Spring Hill. I don't understand that. I've lived on the same street for 56 years. I've never moved. But the school system keeps moving my children. As we speak right now, I have 3 grandchildren who graduated from the Murray County school system, and they all graduated from Columbia Central High School. I've got 6 grandchildren that are at Columbia Central High School. I've got 4 that are at McDowell, and I've got 4 that are put on, and 3 that are McDowell, and the youngest one of them started his first year this year as a kindergartner. And we have a rich heritage with McDowell School. The mayor of the city of Columbia will tell you that when he was at McDowell School and Whitthorne and Columbia Central, my daughter Angie was his stiffest competition academically in school. So I know where he's coming from in regard to McDowell School. But I don't understand why you all have not taken a position in regard to let's do something where we won't have to keep on reinventing the wheel. When I was on the school board, I fought for a countywide rezoning. Before you do anything in regard to the population in McDowell, you all ought to take a heartfelt look at rezoning here in Murray County and make it equitable. If you got to get an old-fashioned compass and put the pointed edge on the school where it is now, and then draw you a circle.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
I don't understand.
The last name on our list, Mayor Mulder, City of Columbia. If you could share with us your address and your name for the record.
Glad to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your election this evening. My name is Chaz Mulder, and along with my wife, Liz Mulder, we live at 601 Mays Place, proud residents of District 3 for the County Commission. I have both of my commissioners here tonight and School Board Member Natasha Hopkins. I'll be brief because I know what's been said is really much of what I wanted to say, and frankly, what I wanted to say has already been said. Also by myself through across social media platforms. But in some ways, I wish tonight I was not speaking to you as the mayor of the city of Columbia so that you could put aside any preconceived notions that you may have about me and my role as mayor of Columbia. In some ways, I wish that I was speaking to you tonight not as a father of 3, one who just left there, one who goes there now, and one who will go there next year, and not as an alum of that school, so that you could put aside the fact that I am biased when it comes to McDowell, because I tell you loud and clear that I would be standing here on behalf of McDowell Elementary School regardless if that's where my kids went and regardless if that's where I went. That's how important the issue is to me. But I can't escape the fact that I am the mayor and I am the father and the former student of McDowell Elementary School. And that's where I come to you tonight. I want to mention one thing regarding the sales tax referendum, and I know some of you have reached out to me individually about this issue, and I've been able to clear the record on that, and for those who haven't, now's the opportunity to do that. As you know now, hopefully you know, that in this room is where the conversation regarding the sales tax referendum first began, at least that I recall. County Mayor Ogles, which by the way, Mr. Mayor, good to see you tonight, I'm glad you're here, myself, Mayor Bill White, Mayor Rick Graham, Dr. Marzak, and a few others were in the room, and we talked about the sales tax referendum. And Dr. Marzak and one or two other school officials who were here discussed the fact that unless we have this referendum, it is unlikely that McDowell will be rebuilt, it's unlikely that Spring Hill High School will have the funds for renovation, and it's unlikely that Mount Pleasant Elementary School will be able to have their renovation. And so we all got on board for the referendum for that specific purpose. Now, to Chairman Fulbright's point, it is true that the referendum itself, the language in the referendum itself, said, paraphrasing, shall the sales tax referendum increase from 9.225 or 9.25 to 9.275 or 9.75 in any event, shall it increase for purposes of funding indebtedness for the school system. That was the language in the referendum. There's no doubt of that. But there's also no doubt that Mayor Ogles, myself, Mayors White and Graham all traversed the county advocating for this sales tax referendum on the premise that that was what was going to be had. Now, we now know that Williamson County did, prior to their referendum, have an agreement in place with all the municipalities regarding giving their portion of the local option sales tax back to the county school system for a period of 3 years. We had not had any knowledge of that whatsoever until we received a letter from Dr. Marzak after the referendum had been passed. Hey, Mayors Mulder, White, and Graham, here's what they did in Williamson County for 3 years. Will y'all now do the same, agree to do the same for a period of 5 years? Again, keep in mind that was the first that we had any knowledge of such an agreement. And in Williamson County, they made that agreement on the front end, and they campaigned and articulated to the voters on the front end. Okay. So in the city of Columbia, we chose not to do something after the fact because that's what the voters were not aware of. They were not aware that we were going to give the portion that we received to the county school system. But what we agreed to do was give $1 million in kind and through cash to the McDowell Elementary specific project. This would ensure that the City of Columbia taxpayer, who's responsible for the City of Columbia increase in local option sales tax, would be contributing directly to a City of Columbia school. And we know that Spring Hill voted down that option as well, and we know that Mount Pleasant, I think, agreed to it, and I think the approximate amount there is about $80,000, maybe a little bit more, in the City of Columbia, as Chairman Fulbright pointed out, would be approximately $2 million. So it's a big difference in what sales tax means to the City of Columbia for this purpose as opposed to what Mount Pleasant agreed to do. Be that as it may, I wanted to clear the air on the sales tax issue, and I'm happy to talk to you more about it. I know my time's running short, Mr. Chairman, if I can have just one more minute.
Yes, sir.
What I also want to say is this. I am a pragmatist. I understand through education over the last couple of weeks that the way the BEP funding formula works, it is just not really in the cards to build another school that is not going to house at least 600 students. I don't agree with the BEP funding formula. In fact, I hope that Representative Sapicki can work to get that changed because I think it will hurt continuously more rural counties, but it is what it is and I understand it now. And so while my first preference would have been for a new McDowell to have been built on the same site, much like the plan that's already in place for several hundreds of thousands of dollars had been spent by this body for that plan, I understand that that may now not be in the cards for McDowell. So I now understand that perhaps what's looked at by this board would be a merger of sorts such that we could build a site that a new McDowell and perhaps a merger of a Baker or a combination through a rezone be done off the McDowell site. If that is going to be the case, okay, so be it. But what I plead from this board tonight is don't close this school until that plan is articulated and until these students at McDowell Elementary School have an opportunity to transition from what we say is the worst facility in the county to the best. And in closing, Angel Hall, will you stand up, please? Angel Hall, my second grade son looks up to everybody in that school, so don't take offense, principals and teachers. But Angel Hall is my son's hero. And if McDowell Elementary School closes, he'll lose his hero. But for me, I'm not worried about my son, because my son is going to be okay. I'm worried about the kid that can't afford to lose a hero, and I hope tonight you'll consider that and not vote to close McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mulder. We appreciate all the public input. Obviously, all these topics are important to those that have spoken, to many others as well, so thank you for sharing your feelings and thoughts. We'll move next to staff reporting. Do you have any staff reports? Then we will move to item number 13, consent items. Have a motion to approve the consent item seconded by Mr. Howell. The motion by Mr. Moore. And this is with the budget amendment taken out that we referenced earlier, Budget Amendment 1310007.
Thank you.
Any discussion on any of the other consent items? Seeing none, we'll vote. Okay. We have it. Passed, okay. Consent items passed. Item 14, new business, continuous learning plan updates. Who wants to take that one?
Good evening. As you know, we are continuing to work on our continuous learning plan. Part of that process is to continue to look at ways that we can provide equity in delivery of instruction to students in K through 4. As we turned in our continuous learning plan, some of the feedback we got was how can we continue to provide equity. So we have looked at that, and we've also have looked at how we deliver instruction, and in some of that discussion and the things we talked about, we think that we need to go ahead and try to make a move to get as many devices as we can to get all our students to one-to-one. So we have had some options. As you know, when we first started doing the ESSER plan, we came to you and we wanted to spend the bulk of the money on devices to get us to one-to-one, but we made some adjustments there, and we started out in 512. So we have looked at the devices we currently have bought through title funds and other things. We've redistributed some devices, we've moved some around, and then we looked at what the delta, so to speak, what was left. So what you have in front of you is a proposal to take some money from fund balance and perhaps fill that gap in our one-to-one. Mr. Seal is also here to answer any questions on the devices, and so I'll open it up for questions.
Can I say something first? Go ahead. What I want to add to that also is, so we can be clear, I think we were asked to turn into our continuous learning plan. We had a due date of August 31st, I believe. So we talked to you guys, we ironed it out, and we had to have it board approved, and it got board approved, and we submitted it. It has been basically turned back to us from the state now twice, as in not signed or not approved. And we finally got feedback on the second time they sent it back, asking exactly what is it you're looking for. And pretty much the feedback is where Mr. Gaines had explained, that because we did not have the devices in the lower grades, that we were creating inequities. So that's kind of where we're coming from by talking about this. And in the last meeting, in our work session, Mr. Gaines was out, as you know, and there were some questions that came up about how many devices and things like that. So we wanted to first let you know exactly where we're at in the CLP process, and then two, kind of bring back up, since he wasn't here during the work session, where we were exactly with the devices.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you. I'm not even sure where to start on this. Is there a timeline we have to adhere to? Is this something that has to be passed tonight?
You're talking about the devices?
Is there any action that needs to take place? Because let me get to where I'm going from this.
Okay.
I have a fundamental problem with everybody knows I don't like when things just kind of show up on the meeting without us really talking about the work session. I really would have liked to have dive, but I understand some of this is coming feedback from the state, so that's gonna kinda alter this. But I have a fundamental problem with the state basically coming in and saying that we're gonna have to spend this money to just get a plan approved. And I'm not disputing that maybe devices are the correct thing for us to go from K through 12, and maybe that is, but I just believe that's something we need to probably discuss a little more as a board and make sure that's really the direction we want to go. I have a problem just approving this to try to get the CLP passed. That's just where my issue is on this, because it comes with a price tag that the state's sure not picking up. This is something that we're going to have to find the money for. So that's where I have an issue with this. So I would prefer if this would go back to work session and talk about this some more. But obviously, if somebody wants to take an action on it other than that, that's fine.
And let me say, too, we were trying to bring it to you guys because, you know, if you look at some of the delivery dates there, more so if you look at some of our statements there, we too wanted to look at some equity in instruction in the way we did deliver instruction. We are looking at other options to find funds. There are some grants out there that we're currently pursuing. We just don't have those grants in hand just yet, and so we are trying to look at other options to get those to fulfill that. So that would be something that we would continue to pursue anyway to try to get to one-to-one. As you know, in our original diploma plan, or now that's our goal, is to get to one-to-one in K-12.
Mr. Lindsay.
Mr. Hickman, from what you said, as of right now, we're operating without an approved continuous learning plan. So what are the repercussions if we continue to operate without a approved continuous learning plan?
Let me start by saying we're working on that. We're working with our representative from the core region to try to get it passed. So what we are being told is, one of the things is we have a competitive grant if we don't have it submitted and approved by, I think is it the 14th or the 17th?
September 18th.
September 18th, that we will not be eligible for that grant. It's $125,000. Then at the end of the game, what they're telling us has to be approved. They've extended it to September 30th, and if it's not approved, then one of the repercussions is they can take our remote students that we have on our file and not include them into the BEP, as in funding, or count them absent. Which, at this point, we're working tremendously hard with our representative at the core region, and one way or another, we're going to move to get it passed. But we're looking at other options, and some of the options just are off the table for us that we can't do for sure.
But they may not count our remote learners. We don't know that for sure. That could be an empty threat, or that could be some substance to that.
As you know, and not to throw anybody under the bus, a lot of times the state will talk in terms of uncertainties, just uses words like may. So that's one of the things that they're telling us, is they may not count our remote students as a present. And
okay. Ms. Irvin?
I mean, that's huge. I mean, BEP, that's a pretty big portion of our funding. I mean, if we don't do this now, are we going to have a chance to vote on it again? I mean, and maybe I don't fully understand because I know I'm new to the game, but I mean, if we're going to lose, we have 3,000 kids, and I mean, that's something that needs to be heavily considered if I'm looking at it correctly. Maybe I'm not, but Mr. Gaines, I have a question for you because I pulled up the proposal. I've got several numbers here. Are we looking at roughly 638,000? Or are we looking at 1.2 million? Because I see two different numbers.
Yes, it's around 638,000. If you look at, one of them is flat out paying the 1.3 million for devices, and if you look at the Apple iPads, that would be the 1.1 million, and then you'd also pay for the Chromebooks also. So essentially, one option is to pay for Chromebooks in K2 at 1.1. We would get them 45 days from the date of order, and Mr. Seal can talk more about specifics why we chose those different options. The other option is we could, lease the iPads at a cost of, $364,941 for 3 years, and then buy the Chromebooks, depending on which choice you got, and that would still give you somewhere in the neighborhood of, $600,000.
But if we do the lease, then that's a turnover at the end of the 3 years, correct? It's not,
Right.
so.
I can allow Mr. Seal, if you would, to let him explain a little more about that lease. Go ahead.
So that, the 1.1 is actually only iPads for K through 2, buying them outright, and then we would have to have the additional between the 238 and the 274 on top of that to buy them all. This is all based off, numbers that we received from principals that we reached out to over the past few weeks on what they currently have. This is taking into account, certain orders that's already been placed with title funds that we were expecting to be delivered. And I know I've gotten the frown face on the lease option before, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about that. This is just an option that I wanted to provide to show the difference. If we have the option, like you said, come year 4, to sell them back at approximately $277,000. So if we were to re-up at that time, it would cost us about $72,000 to re-up all of the iPads for K1 and 2, and enough for the teachers to be able to manage those with things like Apple Classroom that I could get in a weeds with. But or it's not like what we're set up with Lenovo. They are ours after year 3. We do not have to pay a fair market value like we had to pull out of fund balance last year for all that stuff. They say that we buy it for $1 or whatever, but really what they do is they take that off that last lease payment. Is how they make that work. So we do have those two options. I know that one of those main reasons with that lease word was because we had to pay another $200-something on top of those Lenovo's, and that's not the situation with these. But I've got all kinds of information around that if you got any more questions.
Mr. Howe?
Yeah. So, Mr. Steele, yes, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little skittish anytime you mention the word lease and computers because it has bitten us, 4 or 5 times in the last 2 years that I've been on this board. So I'm a little skittish about that one. But am I looking at the other options as we can also have Chromebook options as well for K2?
We can. I even have I think a principal in the room that would back me up and say that they really push for iPads, at least K1. The reason why we added K2 was because of that 3-year rotation, looking forward to have kind of a 3-year rotation on the iPad, so we're not paying, wouldn't be 72 at that point, it would be a third of that, as we progress to that. But research says, Mylexia, there's research that says they spend 8 hours less on a touchscreen device like that than they do on a browser type scenario. And if we look at touchscreen Chromebooks, then you're actually $10 more than the cost of this iPad, and it's only worth probably $45, $50 at year 3 or year 4, where you're getting about $100 back on the iPads. So, trying to look in the future, I guess. We've got 7-year-old or 6-year-old keys Chromebooks that cameras are flipped around. There's keys missing that we've been trying to repair and buy keyboards for and cameras for to make all this work. And these numbers are presented to you all as a source to look forward and kind of a residual value and how we're going to move forward after it, not just a one-time purchase.
So looking at option 1 of a K2 iPad at $1.1 million, and then just to cover the rest of elementary, I've got to spend $637,000.
No. So 1.1 was all the iPads, K1 and 2, and then whichever one of the 3 options below that, 270, depending on when you want to get them delivered, essentially is how that looks. So obviously vendors are doing what they can to get them as quick as possible, but that's why that first one that's here the soonest is the most expensive, and the cheapest is March.
So I'm still looking at $1.3 million to include iPads and Chromebooks for the entire K4.
If you buy them outright, that's correct.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Moore. Or wait a minute, who's late? Ms. Irwin.
Sorry about that. So if we spend $638,000 roughly, that's still not gonna get us 1-to-1. It's gonna basically take the 1.1 to get us 1-to-1. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, if we choose the lease option, it's $637,000.
That's the lease,
And
okay.
that's the lease only on the iPads. We purchased the Chromebooks outright. It's only on the iPads because of the residential value of them.
Do we know what we would lose? And I understand, I don't like, having a gun to my head, feeling like we have to jump because, like you say, hypotheticals. So I'm not trying to overreact on it either, but do we know, do we have any mercy with the state if we don't do this tonight? I mean,
Yes, and I just want to be careful because I don't want to paint a picture where I'm telling you guys we have to do this or it's definitely not going to get approved. What I do want to paint a picture is right now our CLP is not being approved because they're saying they have problems with the packet system that we have in the K4 areas. They see it as an inequity, and one of the things that they promoted is to make that inequity to be to do away with inequity is to make sure we have a 1-to-1 device policy for that K4 as well. And so if this doesn't, if we cannot get the devices, then we will be, obviously working with our representative and trying to find, where do we go, how can we maneuver, what do we need to do to make this pass? And right now, like I said, there's a couple options, and some of them are just off the board. We can't do them at all. But, and I want to kind of go ahead and speak forward too, because, and you may want to talk to an elementary principal because we have a few here, is, some of the problems that are being promoted with the packets itself during this remote time, because as you guys have seen that we are starting to see where we're having to pivot schools, elementary schools to remote, and some of the problems it poses having the packets versus if they had a device for every kid. And like I said, if you want to talk to one of the elementaries, and I haven't prompted them or talked to them about this, so, you may want to hear what they have to say.
That's kind of like right on cue, because I have had some experience on remote for K4, and I think if you'll recall when we talked about the continuous learning plan, I didn't like the packets for K4, and I said it then. And I talked about the inequity and all that at that point, and we moved in a different direction. And I did the packets with my children for the last 2 weeks. And I will tell you, I'm not so sure the devices are the answer either. I just have a hard time seeing a kindergartner signing on to ClassLink, getting into their Google Class Meet, entering in their Google password, entering in their ClassLink password or their Google password. It's a lot. And I can just tell you from conversations that I've had with other parents that are somewhat technologically savvy, they struggled with it. And so I worry about a 5-year-old that does not know their letters, having to do 2 uppercase consonants, 1 lowercase consonant, 2 numbers, 1 consonant for their password, plus their name at student.murrayk12.org. It's a lot for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old. It was a lot for my 9-year-old to do. So I would really kind of like for us to kick it to the work session, have some discussion about what these other options are. I'm happy to have a specially called meeting if we need to meet a grant timeline, but I'm very concerned about, really, we're committing ourselves to $1.365 million based on this proposal, because those lease payments are going to come up in year 2 and year 3, so it's really $1.365 million based on my calculations. And I don't like making that decision on the fly. I really think that we should have, if this was the direction that staff wanted to go, I would have appreciated an email between the work session and tonight with just some information as to why we were having to go this route, the fact that the continuous learning plan had been denied, why we've got to spend this money, because I don't know where we're going to get $1.365 million right now. I don't know where we're going to get $630,000 with the things that we've got coming up. I'm not saying that we don't need to spend it, but I'd really like to hear from staff going forward how this really fits into how we want to educate children and what the overall picture is.
Yes, if you could answer that.
And I apologize, on the CLP, what has happened is the first time it came back was between the work session and this time, and they weren't very clear. It was our understanding they had asked us several questions, and it was our understanding just answer the questions and it'll be fine. And then after the last work session, it was submitted, everything looked like it was good to go, and then we got it resubmitted back, and we finally just said, what's the bottom line? Why is this not getting passed? And this was between the work session and now. And we basically were told that they were not happy because the way it was presented, the packet they felt presented an inequity. And like I said, there was a couple of options they gave us, not saying you had to do either of these options, but it was presented to us, so these are what other districts did to get their CLP approved. And and the purpose was, when we talked about the last time, you guys had asked about Mr. Gaines bringing in the numbers with the computers, and then he could not be here that night, so we kind of pushed it to the night. So the purpose was we really just wanted to go back from the work session and tell you guys the numbers. And so that's kind of where we're at.
So I think, in my opinion, if we can discuss this at the work session, and if we are put in a pickle, per se, to where if we have to do a special called meeting, I agree. I just know we cannot afford to lose those BEP funds. I think we all agree to that, but I also understand we got to figure out where that money's coming from. Is there any way that there might be any potential help from like the CARES Act with all of this? I mean, is there any grants that I don't know, is there anything that maybe outside of fund balance?
We are, like you said, we are still seeking 2 other grants. One of them, of course, like Mr. Hickman said, is contingent upon the CLP being approved. I think our effort tonight to try to seek to find ways to move to reduce the inequity in our system will help us in getting the CLP approved. We have reached out to the state and talked about this is a plan. As you know before, this has been a plan for us to try to get to 1-to-1 in our system. I guess you could say tonight's kind of trying to ramp that up and go faster. But there are, I'll back up to say there are other grant opportunities. One of them is contingent upon the CARES Act being approved, which we think once we get it approved, that'll be, that's an easy grant. We're eligible for $125,000, and so we think that's an easy grant. And then there's another one that's out there that has it's a reimbursable grant that we're also working on. We found out some new information today, so we're reworking some of our numbers, so we may have the opportunity to get other funding to, but of course that grant, the caveat is you got to purchase devices with it. So certainly that's what we would want to do.
All right, I don't see any, well, I do now. Mr. Lindsey.
I just want to make a motion, we postpone this to our next work session.
Okay. Is there a second to that? There's a second. I do have one question just in the discussion period. Mr. Laconin, if we go with a lease option, does that have to be approved by the county commission?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, any other discussion on moving this to the work session coming up? I see none. I don't think we need to vote. If that's just the will of take no action, we'll just move it to the work session then. We'll save the vote. Thank you for that discussion. We'll move that to our work session. Item number 2 under new business, discussion of nurses. Mr. Pointer.
Good evening, Chair Fulbright and school board members. Does everybody have the latest updated information? If you don't, I can pass out hard copies if you would like a hard copy. Hard copy, digital. You want a hard copy? All right, I got you.
Do you have enough hard copies? Because
yeah, I got plenty.
I can't read a computer screen anymore.
I got plenty.
My old age. Thank you. Let those young kids look at the computer. What do you have to share with us, Mr. Pointer?
So I have the nursing staff increase proposal. It was presented at the work study session, but I was also asked to add some additional information at the work study session. So I have included all of that information in here. I do know we have some new school board members present. Mr. Fulbright, do you want me to go over it to bring everybody up to speed of what's in the documentation, or how do you want me to go?
If you can do it quickly, I would like you to. Otherwise, give us a very thumbnail overview.
All right, will do. So, for all board members, of course, if you know, at the work study session and previously at other board meetings and work study sessions, we have been talking about the increased nursing staff across Maury County Public Schools. And as you know, as you heard from others in the room, and as you heard from Nurse Alley at the school board work study session, our nurses do a tremendous job day in and day out. Heroes on the front line. I couldn't ask to be a part of a better team and to lead a better team of nurses, and I'm proud to associate myself with each and every one of them. If you see in the context of the proposal, you see the amount of work that is required and what they do on a daily basis. And in the proposal, in which I go into detail about things to consider, currently only one school has a dedicated nurse, which is Culleoka Unit School. Currently, our nursing staff are stretched thin, moving from school to school on a daily basis. Allocating a nurse to each school or adding additional nurse will reduce the cost of travel we pay monthly. Total budgeted for the year, $13,000. When a nurse is out, who do we designate to know how to handle all of the potential COVID concerns in addition to regular workload? Without a dedicated nurse at our schools, can we realistically ask staff to monitor the isolation room? We had 2 nurses that were going out on maternity leave, and thank goodness we have one coming back really soon. The average cost to add a full-time nurse is $55,429.35, which includes benefits, and the average cost to add a part-time nurse is $20,484.28. And this was added to the packet per school board member David Moore. The contract cost to add a full-time nurse at $75 per hour is roughly about $105,000 per nurse per year. I did get word before I left out, with an additional contracted nurse, we could do it roughly, this is a whole totally different company because I've been calling them like crazy. It's roughly at $45 per hour, and that still puts us over what we currently pay our current nurses now. So the additional information requested is why you see that it's different. And I've included the rationale as to why that additional information, and you see that included in there. And one of the things that was asked to be brought before the table is our ideal nursing scenario. I won't belabor you. I won't read over all the information and details, but it goes into specific reasons as to why we need either 1 nurse or 2 nurses at a particular school. And I have to commend Nurse Diane Alley for working very diligently and hard on this piece of the information, because we want it to be as realistic as possible. We didn't want to come back and say we need 4 nurses at every school. We wanted to definitively show, based on real time and what we're dealing in right now, what we actually needed at each one of our schools. So if you turn to the options that are on the table currently, if you could present the options that we have in front of you. Option 1 is a full-time dedicated nurse in each of our schools. This is important because in the event a nurse is out, for whatever reason, we'll be able to easily cover the most critical needs of the schools. We would go from 13 full-time nurses to 23 full-time nurses. That would be 10 additional nurses. We would keep our part-time nursing positions to fill in at various schools where we have a significant amount of treatments. If you note from what I passed out last time to what I did now, I made an adjustment so that option 1 matched identically to what we would be requesting for contract nurses. So I made sure that those 2 aligned, and so that it was apples to apples. Our current nursing budget is $830,571.79. Proposed would take that up to $1,384,000, and the difference would be $554,000 would be the difference. Cost of nurse with benefits, we talked about that before, as well as the cost of adding the part-time nurses in there as well. Option 2 would be to utilize full-time staff to cover multiple schools within proximity to one another. Add part-time staff to fill gaps and holes during transition of full-time staff, and the proposed to increase our full-time nursing staff from 13 to 19 and add an additional part-time staff, taking us from 3 to 4. Current budget, proposed budget, and the difference in that would be 353, 60, 38, salary and benefits. Option 3, which was also added, was to utilize contract services to fill gaps at each school. This will allow for a quicker turnaround time with placement of nurses. And I put in the company that we spoke with and provided a quote of $75 per hour for a 40-hour work week. And we would go from 13 nurses to 23. That's with the alignment of 10. And that would take us from $830 currently to the proposed, to a difference of $1,050,000. And then, of course, you see the breakdown of the cost. The fourth option, which is the ideal scenario, which is included in this, the options present the ideal coverage scenario for our schools across the district. In addition to all the medical treatments required each day, this will allow our nurses to provide much-needed health care and education to our staff and students. This will prevent gaps in services when nurses are out, and will allow for nurses to have that's an error right there, to have a greater level of attention and focus on our school versus two or three schools at a time. And of course, this takes us from 13 full-time and 3 part-time to 27 full-time nurses and 1 part-time nurse. And then, of course, the math on that proposed will be 1,565, 614.13, and the difference will be $735,042.34. If you go to the next page where it talks about the proposed salary schedule for nurses, this is all included in because I was also requested to add this into the documentation for conversation. So one of the things that we face with the school salary schedule is that all the nurses that come in are based on a first-year teacher salary at 0. So it does not matter your level of education. It doesn't matter if you have a doctorate. Doesn't matter if you're RN, LPN, whatever the case may be. You will be brought in at 0 and 1, or the 4 that's aligned there. And in a lot of ways that is problematic for what we have going on at the district, because as we decide or as we work to bring nurses into our current district, as well as the current nurses that we have in our district, that throws our levels off from an academic standpoint, and what we're also saying about education. Because to my knowledge, no other salary schedule is treated the same, especially for our nurses. So for a teacher, if I have a master's and I'm coming in at 0, I'm moved on the scale. If I'm a first-year teacher with no experience, I come at the scale at one place. But for our nurses, regardless of education, they come in at 0. So I can have a doctorate in nursing and have all the experience in the medical field. I'm still coming in at 0 under that scale there. So I've added what those scales look like. These align exactly to what the teacher salary is. I just changed the headings above those. And the last page that you have on the documentation is that actual breakdown for our current nursing staff, what that adjustment would look like, and what that difference would look like for those nurses on the last page. This was proposed, all of this stuff was proposed, if you know, in the earlier part of the year, as we had leadership change and as we had issues going on with COVID, whether or not we had tax revenue, et cetera, it was asked that we revert back to last year's budget. And so a lot of the things that you're seeing now, a lot of the things that was discussed was removed at that time because of that.
I have a couple questions before we get too far down the road. The salary and benefits number, is that based on a 12-month? Because we're already part of the way into the school year. Would that number be lower as we look at completing the school year?
I'm sure it will be adjusted some when we bring people on later, so the number probably won't be as higher, but just to keep it as simple as possible mathematically, I kept it from that, and that's the number that I was able to get from finance.
Okay. I want to share just a few other things that weigh into this discussion. For the last 2 legislative sessions, this has actually been brought before the House of Representatives in Tennessee. The current funding level that the state provides through BEP, specifically for nurses, is they pay for one nurse for every 3,000 students, which leaves us with state-funded nurses of 4 in our district. The proposal has been 4 years ago, it was to increase that number to 1 per school. This past session, it was to provide 1 nurse for every 750 students, which would give us 17 state-funded positions. I bring all this up to say that this is something that the state, at least glancingly, recognizes as a need. And I think through this year, it's going to be seen as a much greater need. Both of those proposals, by the way, did fall short in committee and never made it to floor vote. The estimated cost, just if anybody wants to know statewide, for changing it to 1 to 750 students is $39 million per year. With all that said, this, Mr. Howell, is where I said with your legislative position now, this is something that needs to be really kept up on. Oh, Lindsay? Oh. Take Chad with you. He'll do a good job. But this is something that has been brought up there. In fact, our state senator and our state representative are on the education committee and have sway over this kind of stuff. I'll go ahead and state my position since I don't see any other lights on. I'd like to see us do option 1, even if we have to take it out of fund balance, simply because it is an emergency. I see us being in crisis with this. We don't want to use fund balance to anticipate staffing every year, so I would say it would be a 1-year agreement. And hopefully we can get some stuff going at the legislature to get some additional funds to help us out. But regardless, I think this is something that has to be addressed, and this is the way to address it, in my opinion, at this time. Mr. Lindsay.
Well, to kind of echo what Mr. Fulbright just said, I'll disagree with him on one point, but the bottom line for it for me, if we look at our fund balance number, and Doug can correct me when I misspeak, but right now we're sitting at a fund balance number of $11.8 million, and we put $2.3 million into fund balance from last year. So that $2.3 million was either expenditures we did not expend or revenues over and above what we had budgeted. So I say all that to say we could have put nurses in this year's budget and funded it. We could have put a nurse in every school in this year's budget and funded them totally without asking anybody for another dime. And where I come from with it, it would be hard for me to sleep at night if I did not vote to put a nurse in a school and something bad happened to a kid and I'm sitting here with $11 million in fund balance. I won't say any more than that, but I agree with Mr. Fulbright. The only place I disagree with Mr. Fulbright, I hope this is, I'm going to put Mr. Hickman on the spot right now, but if this gets approved tonight, I hope we never see a budget come before us that don't have this included every time in it. I don't want it to be on the chopping block as we move forward. I want it to be something that we as a county decide this is what we need to do. So I don't want it to be an interim position. I don't want it to be a one-time thing. I want this to be the norm in Murray County.
Let me just go back to that. I meant for a one-time fund balance hit, because that's exactly what you said. This is the fellow right here is going to put it in the budget. Well, Doug has a little say, but you're the one ultimately responsible. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you now.
Not to be put on the spot or anything, and I don't want to steal into your thunder there, Mr. Lindsay, but I think Mr. Moore has already kind of pointed that finger to me before too about if this is something that we feel strongly about. I agree it should stay in the budget. And we call it budget season, but I'll be kind of honest, Doug and I have already started the talks now, and even though usually budget season is about December, January, because we're well aware of it. And kind of moving ahead and talking way ahead is, we expect the budget when we bring to you to be what we consider a true budget, and we'll get more into that when we get into budget season.
Mr. Moore.
All right, thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. So on the last 2 pages, the proposed salary schedule, that's not included in any of these dollar figures here, correct?
No, if it's the board's will, it would be in addition to the current number that's proposed in the
So on that, if I could just kind of, since that's kind of separate, I would absolutely love to talk about that, because that's something we've talked as a board about, having those things come forward. But I think if we could kind of keep that separate from what we're talking about now, because so these dollar figures that we're kind of discussing don't include that.
Correct.
Unless someone were to add that to some kind of motion. So I just want to be clear on that. Second piece, out of the 4 options that you have here, professionally, what is the department recommendation?
Professionally, we would go with, given the circumstances that we're in now, we would go with option 1 to put a nurse in every school. Then professionally, if in the conversation we did not have the resources because we were trying to make sure we covered enough within the district, then we would do option 2. But professionally, if we have the funds to do option 1, then we need to do option 1. Always ideal is ideal. You know, that's the we presented that because that was what was requested. But given the times and what we're in right now, I just understand where we are, and so.
And I appreciate that. So you're saying, theoretically, if this were budget season, as we're talking about here, you would actually be bringing us option 4, or that's what you would go to the superintendent with, saying, this is what the district needs, this is where we should be. Is that what you're?
Correct. Yeah, based on the
I don't mean to put
need.
words in your mouth, but I'm
No.
assuming that's what your
I would
your default
present him.
is.
I would present him the actual need of the district, and then through budget conversations, it would either be trimmed back or not. But we would bring him exactly what we needed during budget time.
Okay. So, and I'd asked you some questions by email a couple of days ago, or maybe, I can remember it was today, whatever.
It was today.
It's all a blur.
couple of hours ago.
And my questions were about level of staffing, and I know this kind of gets in the weeds a little bit, but I had questions about whether RNs were needed, or LPNs, or what other levels of service providers could be used inside of our schools that would still keep our kids safe and meet needs, but because let's be honest, some of the things are high-level tasks that need certain resources. Others are not. And I know currently we're doing a lot of things, for example, contact tracing that we're doing, which, by the way, we don't get paid to do. But our nurses are doing them because we have a need to take care of our kids, and I understand that. But, so what kind of things, are there other options out there other than looking at just putting RNs in there? And I'm just asking the same question I already asked, and you've already answered, but I'd like you to answer that here as well.
I can kind of go down from a state level, if you want me to, by law, kind of what is the requirements in the school. I do know that, you know, based on the current budget structure that we have now, right, and the way that nurses are paid, it's really irrelevant whether or not we have an RN, an LPN, or a person that comes in and helps does that job, because they're paid the exact same amount. So to get into deeper level of conversation about whether or not we want to have an RN or LPN, typically that conversation will be around whether or not we could save money in providing those individuals into the school. But what I do know is, just based on when we went and talked to these various contracted services, there is no shortage of RNs that want to get into our school district, because they've already been calling nurses at our schools and saying, hey, can you put a good word in me? I want to go to this. I would love to be in a school. That's what I've been looking to do. But if you would like, I can go into specifically by the law kind of the role of nurses, the role of LPNs, et cetera, just for clarity for the board if you like. I can go over these bullets. It's tough to give a short version because there's a lot of bullet points. I don't want to leave nothing out.
That may be something that comes up when we look at the graduated scale. So I think with this conversation, let's stick with this topic.
That was all I had, thank you.
I did, and the board, we get emails, and, you know, they know my feelings on this. I had my child, we get notified whenever there's an emergency at any school. My child was one of those emergencies. They actually called the ambulance. My child's healthy. I mean, she has asthma, but never had any problems before. And they said, we've called because she's having trouble breathing, and it's 17 minutes before anybody can get here. So in line with what Mr. Lindsay has said, and I know we all agree that this is a need, I believe, but I just want to reiterate, we do have a lot of schools that it takes a while to get there. And like, the lady who, and I'm sorry, I had your name in a different thing. Whenever I keep switching back and forth, it keeps logging me out of this meeting. But the mother who spoke, I mean, I'm fortunate that I've got healthy children that go to school, but I couldn't imagine having one that you really have to worry about every minute their health. I just don't think we can gamble on this. It's not worth losing a child. I mean, we never know. It could be one of ours, because an emergency can happen any time. And I just want to reiterate that, so.
Well, we talked about this. We talked about this at the board meeting, or at the previous meetings, and I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we accept option 1 in the amount of $554,293.83 to come out of fund balance.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second to that motion? Option 1 was the motion. Option 1 was the motion. There's a second to option 1. Ms. Kinzer seconds. Is there any other discussion? I'm gonna go ahead and say I prefer option 4. I mean, I don't know if that's something that would gain any traction as far as amending the proposal or what, but Ms. Kinzer.
I was sitting here pushing on my light and wanted to ask you, I mean, you said optimal is option 4. That would take care of everything, right? Okay. Then, even though I've seconded the motion, I really think we should go with option 4. Because if that's what we need, that's what we need. Mr. Conan, can we spend that money?
It's your money.
Okay. Well, if Mr. Howell...
It's in there.
Are you amenable to option 4?
Yes, I can withdraw the motion.
Okay, so we have a withdrawal of the motion. Would you like to withdraw your second?
I do.
Okay. There's no motion on the floor at this point. Is there now?
I'll make a motion for option 4.
We have a motion for option 4.
And I second the motion.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion on these options? Mr. Moore.
So, let's go back. So this would include a change in salary structure? No. It does not?
No. The salary structure change is completely separate.
Okay.
And I tried to do the best I could in the language in the write-up, that if it was the board's will, then that adjustment will be included into whatever option number is chosen.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So just in summary, looking at the numbers, the difference that we would be contributing this year would be no more than $735,000, because there may be a little less since we're part of the way through the year. Then we would expect to see approximately $1.56 million in next year's budget to accommodate the nurses that we're bringing on. Is that a correct summary?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any further discussion? Ms. Kinzer?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any further discussion?
I've got one.
Yeah, Ms. Parker.
Mr. Pointer? Oh, sorry, do you need to go? Okay. Mr. Pointer, so when we get to budget time, though, are you going to be bringing back to us, though, adjusting the salary schedule that will then be asking for $616,000 on top of the $1.5 million if we approve this?
You said 616,000?
Is that what I was thinking?
No, if you go all the way to the right, it
It'd
didn't
just be
print
an
in-
extra 63,000.
It'd be if we was to do it today, it would be an extra 63 that does not include benefits.
Okay.
So it'd be only a bump of 63,020. But if we was to do it, we'd have to do the entire salary adjustment for 27 nurses. And so it would not, in all actuality, fall at that 1.5 or whatever it is. It would be adjusted. And then we would have conversations prior to, leading up to that, to gauge the board's level of comfort prior to doing an adjusted salary scale for nurses, if that makes sense.
And I'll just say, I think that doing the salary scale adjustment, I mean, I know we're not talking about doing it tonight, and we don't want to confuse the two, but I think that's really important that we do that. I guess what I heard you say, though, was that if you could, if you could have anything, you would want option 4, but understanding all the needs in the system and knowing
we're getting requests for iPads and Chromebooks and all those things that we don't know where they're gonna come from. And we're talking about an allocation that Mr. Fulbright said was one nurse per 3,000 students. Like, we're making a drastic change with this. And if that's the direction that the board wants to go, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I just think that we can cover what staff thinks we need with about $250,000 less, which is then $250,000 potentially that we can use on actually educating children. Now, granted, they can't be educated if they're not healthy and they're not in school, but they still have a lot of, we know we have a lot of educational needs, and I do just have some concern about making this big of an allocation at this point when staff said that they could make do with and cover every school, so that if there's an emergency at any of our schools, we have coverage under option 1.
Mr. Moore. Oh, Mr. Sims.
I agree with Ms. Parker. I love option 4. However, come budget time every year, we're looking at crunching numbers, and $200,000 come budget time is going to be very important to us. It always is. I do not want to get us in a position where we're cutting textbooks or whatever come budget time because we vote now for such a large one-time purchase out of fund balance right now. It won't be fund balance when we're talking in February for budget. And so I would be more comfortable with option 1, although option 4 looks great. We do have lots of other needs that we're going to be coming up throughout this year, I think. Cleaning supplies, probably. Who knows what else?
Mr. Laconin, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to say that we would put this in a budget amendment and send it to the work session for that approval, but this approval here should be able to give the go-ahead for Mr. Hickman to get moving on this.
Okay. Mr. Lindsey.
Just make 2 points. The first point, when we look at $735,000, that's for 12 months, taking it out of fund balance. We're 2 months into the fiscal year. It has to leave here and go to the county commission to get approved because they're taking money out of fund balance. It will take some time to get these people hired, so we may be looking at a number of more like $550,000 rather than $735,000 out of fund balance. So that number can be scary, I see. But also, I go back to, we put $2.3 million into fund balance from last year's budget. We budgeted the same revenue numbers this year as we had last year, and even though we're just 3 or 4 months in, we can see that sales tax numbers have not decreased. They've increased even more, and unless we have another disaster, our revenue numbers are going to be up more than last year when we put $2.3 million in fund balance. So I say all that. I'm for a nurse in every school. I'm for option number 4. Whatever we do, but I just don't think that the money side of it right now has to scare us. And just to be honest, fund balance is our rainy day fund, and nobody in this room has ever lived in a rainier day than what we live in now when it comes to the health of our kids. So I think it's a wise decision on our part if we go that way.
Okay, I see one more light on. Mr. Moore.
Yeah, thank you. So, I'm just gonna say, we do have a motion on the floor, right?
We do have a motion for option 4 on the floor.
I will not be supporting this, and it's not because I don't think we need to do something, but I do believe there are, other ways we need to tackle this, and I think we should probably be looking at some different ways of looking at the staffing of this. Obviously, you disagree with what you guys think you need to have. I think there are other ways to tackle this that are more cost efficient, and I think we should take a better look at it. Where I'm looking at it, I think the option one probably is better for now, but I'm just not convinced that this is the right one.
The way I see this happening this evening is we'll vote on this motion that's on the floor, and depending on the outcome of that one, we can entertain other motions if needed, or we'll go with what we decide tonight. With that being said, we will go ahead and prepare to vote for option 4. The motion made by Mr. Howell, seconded by Ms. Kinzer. Okay, looks like it is a total of 7 for yes, 3 nays. Option 4 is what we will proceed with. Now I need that gavel. All right, we've been at this Fun Fest for 2 hours, so we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back with the budget amendments and a discussion of facilities. I've got a gavel, and I'm not afraid to use it. If we could gather back together, we've got a few more important items to tackle. Yes, do we have board members that are returning? All right, we are going to go ahead and resume. We are to the point of the evening of budget amendments. Mr. Lukonen, I will turn proceedings to you.
We just have the one amendment for art funds that was requested from the board. We also need to remember to address the budget amendment we took off of consent.
Correct.
1007. So I guess I'll defer to Mr. Lindsay on that one since he asked to pull it off consent.
Okay, we're going to take this one for the art supplies first. Motion by Mr. Moore, second by Ms. Kinzer. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll vote. If you run real quick, you can get up here and vote. We're going to have a plethora of nurses, so it'll be all right. Voting on the budget amendment for art supplies. Yeah, I was just kidding with you. Natasha. We have the vote is in. We have a unanimous approval for this budget amendment. Now we will go to budget amendment that we pulled out of consent. Mr. Lindsay, do you have any questions on that one?
I guess I just have a comment to refresh everybody's memory. It's actually asking to pull $1,700 out of fund balance to pay for overtime in the HR department's budget. I just fundamentally have a problem that we're in the second month of the year and we're asking to pull $1,700 out of fund balance out of a budget of $450,000 approximately, out of the same budget that did not spend $70,000 last year. We have to go, if we pull it out of fund balance, we have to go ask the county commission to pull it out of fund balance, whereas if Mr. Lindsay can find it within his budget, and I'm sure that he can, we could amend it within his own budget. It doesn't have to leave this room, and we can take care of it there. But my request would be not to take that out of fund balance, and if Mr. Lukonen has an idea where to take it, I'd be willing to amend that budget amendment tonight so we can take care of it.
Regardless, though, since it is, overtime is a payroll line item, it will have to go to the commission regardless. However, yes, the travel budget in the HR department, I don't expect it to be expended. Is Mr. Lindsay here, Michael? No, sorry, Mr. Scott Lindsay. But he did not expend that full budget last year, and he could more than likely afford to take it out of his travel budget.
Do we have any action on this budget amendment? Seeing none, we take no action on it. Next item on our agenda, zoning and facilities.
Good evening. You guys will find on your agenda tonight the items that you requested from us at the work session. These were each of the things that you discussed, and we brought back to you a projected savings. If you were to leave the McDowell facility, the timeline that you requested that was sped up from the one that we presented to you at the work session, capacity numbers that were updated as of 8/11 across the district, and then I put the EMG report again on there for you. So I'm here for questions or any comments that you have or need from me.
Mr. Moore.
Well, to go ahead and get this started off, I make a motion that we continue or approve the timeline as presented. I'm sorry, which one is that one? The revised one?
Yes, sir.
The revised timeline as presented to proceed with this process.
I second the motion.
We have a second motion by Mr. Moore, second by Ms. Kinzer. This is in reference to the timeline that is revised in our packet, starting with September step. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but September's step is to approve discontinuing usage of McDowell Elementary Physical Plant effective June 2021. I think that's the key thing that we're looking at yay or nay on tonight. Mr. Howe.
So, I'm not quite sure why we're looking to discontinue today. I would like to move forward with plans so that when we get to that point, we can do that. To me, I think that when we have a plan in place to include zoning, that will be the kind of the point at which of no return. If we approve a zoning plan in Columbia to where we're going to put these kids and see what that looks like along this process, I'm not sure why we're voting to close McDowell right now. We may get through this process and look at it and start pushing our students to these different schools and realize that this isn't what we want to do. So I think it's premature to vote to close McDowell. I have no problem with putting a plan in place because a plan is a plan. Plans change every day. So I have no problem with putting a plan in place and going forward with this timeline. However, I can't vote tonight to close it because I don't know what our plan is. So until I have a plan...
Yeah. We went back and watched the work session a couple of times, and kind of based off of the conversation that we had there, this was kind of what we saw was asked for. Being that part of that conversation was that this is an ongoing conversation that we've had for the last 10 years, and if at some point a line is not drawn that we make a decision, this is what we're doing, we bring a plan. If we bring a zoning plan, you know signs go up and people don't like where a line is, then this conversation becomes part of a proposed conversation that folks are very passionate about, and it just keeps continuing. We have maintained all along
And again, we brought, based off of the conversation we had at the work session, what we felt like was asked of us. We have maintained, and the reason that the mayors came to the room all along is we've maintained, Mr. Breeden did before me, and I'm there with him. We do not need to continue to live in that house. So if you don't make a decision, we can do zoning. We can have out-of-zone discussions. We can do those things. But that all becomes something that is, what if? What if we do this? What if we draw the line here? At some point, operationally, and again, I know it's hard, you cannot separate the school and the physical plant, but I'm speaking to you about the physical plant. We either got to be all in, and there's not money, I think we've talked about that, to be all in. Long term, in 10 years, this facility, the current facility, would cost you $29 million to stay into the current facility. $6 million on the front end that you would have to have funded in some way before we start next year. And the work really needs to be done by August. We can't get money until at least, we got money this year in the summer. If we don't get it until sometimes like we do October, we're saying to you we need the work done by August, which I don't know if you gave me $6 million tonight, we can have the work done by August next year. But that's what it is to stay in year one. So we brought, based off of conversation and based off of operationally what we have said for at least 4 years now, it's not a safe house. It's not one that we feel that we need to be putting children in. I understand the emotion. Believe me. 22 years in this system, this is what I do. I do kids. Not right now, okay? I'm asked to look at plants and facilities and buses and things right now. This is not a safe house. Based off of what we brought that just for that point. So I'm not arguing with you. I appreciate your position, but I need everyone to know the reason that we started with that hard line is I saw what zoning did at Culleoka. I saw the signs go up, and I saw talk off of folks going, yes, we really need to do this, to, no, we can't do that. And then we got told, pull this, pull this, pull this, pull this, only do what you absolutely have to. Have to in this is we got to get out of that house. One way or the other.
I just need to see a plan.
Yeah.
I need to see what's next.
And
I understand. I don't have a problem drawing a hard line. I do it every day in my job. But what I'm saying is I need a plan of what's next.
And that's
like,
what
are we going to do? So if we close McDowell, this is what we're going to do. This is our next step.
And I think what we put in the timeline is your next step. This is it. If you do that, then in October and November, we build those zones with you. We have those discussions with you. Because that's what we were asked for. That's the plan right there that we were asked to bring to you. Whether you vote to do it or not, that's fine. And you know we're going to always do what you asked us to do. We work for you. We're going to do what you ask us to do. But we built the plan off of the conversation that we've been ongoing having for a while now.
Thank you. Mr. Howell, anything else? Mr. Moore.
Thank you. So, and again, the reason I said the motion the way it is, the motion is, in my opinion, not to close McDowell. The motion is to proceed with this timeline that does include closing McDowell. And there's some very specific reasons why I wanted that to happen. I know in the past, some of you that have been on this board, we have gone through a process of just a simple rezone, which this is much more than a simple rezone. But that was thrown on us in July, right before the school year was supposed to start. I know when we did the Belmont study, one of the recommendations they had was when we do rezones, because that was something that was talked about extensively, was to please give everybody involved as much time as possible. And one of the recommendations was to have that information out to parents and the community by January before you start the next school year. So one of the things, and we've had parents come to us for this, and they've talked at these meetings, and they all said, we understand these are difficult decisions, but please be honest with us, be open with us, and give us as much information as soon as you can. And through all of this, one of my hard lines in the sand had been, I want to have parents and the community know what we're doing by January. And that was, and just, we have to back in above that. And I think that's what the staff has brought us, is a timeline that lets us be open and honest about what that plan is, Mr. Howell, that we're looking at. And I agree with you. We need to see that. It needs to be discussed. There's actually a whole lot more. This is a very short version. I understand from previous discussions, there's a lot of talks that are going to have to go into this, both community-wide. The board itself are going to have to weigh out a lot of things and what this looks like. And I agree that everyone should see that. But for us to have that information potentially, if it goes this direction and follows through, to have that available in January, we kind of have to start that now. And it's just an unfortunate thing. It takes time, but it's time we need to put into it. So that's the reason, again, what I proposed was that we have a motion to accept the timeline. And at any point, this board may decide, based on information we go through, that we may have to shift gears or change directions, and that may happen. But that will be part of the process, and it will be open to the public, and we can share that with everyone as we come across that information as well.
There you go. I just want to be clear, this is a timeline that's just talking about the physicality of the building. It is not saying that we're not going to look at building another school. We absolutely are. Do we need to build a bigger school? We absolutely do. We've asked 4 years in a row for the commission to help fund it. They didn't, and during that time, it seemed feasible to build behind the school. We got plans to do that, but the size of that school was too small. There's no room for growth. And now we've got to be a little better stewards of the county's money and make sure that we build something that can provide for the growth that we know is already here. This timeline, to me, makes the most sense. At least we know about the physicality of the building. I know what a personal issue this is for all of you. I appreciate all the emails, even from you, Bryson. My former student reminded me. But here's the thing. On this board, sometimes we have to look back and say what's good for students. That's our mission, what's best for students. And it would just be so great if we could keep all of those kids together and those wonderful teachers and the fact that they are a diverse group. But you know, we've got 3 other Columbia schools that have the same demographics, the same, I mean, we have sweet, precious schools with great teachers in them. And so I just want to do what's best for kids as far as providing them another facility that will meet the needs going forward, and that we can now let parents know that by January there'll be zoning plans in place. So I fully support this revised, what you presented.
Ms. Irvin.
This has been very difficult for me. I've lost sleep over it. I've went to countless people. I've toured McDowell. I've met with some of the mayors. I have talked to countless individuals. So this is not something I take lightly at all. I look at this if this was my children's home. So I've got some questions, and I'm sorry. I'm new to the game, and I keep apologizing for that. But I feel like there's a whole wealth of information, even though this has been my whole life for the last month. I feel like there's so much I don't know. So let me ask you this. This is where I feel uncomfortable. I feel very uncomfortable proposing a plan not knowing what's going to happen. I feel like if we propose a plan, then these kids, and this is just me, I'm thinking like a parent, I'm having my parent hat on, that we're going to lose these kids in the shuffle. So I've tried to think of every solution possible because I value community. I think that it's very important. I know you do too. I'm not trying to, desensitize that. I also believe these kids need a new school building. I also agree it needs to be a big enough school building, and I also see that it's likely it's not going to be on that campus. But let me ask you this. I've heard $5 million, I've heard $6 million to keep McDowell current for 1 year. So I look at that and I think, well, if it costs, $25 million to build a new school, that's a lot of money. But let me think like an investor for a minute. This is where I've been. What's going to happen to that McDowell building? So if I put $5 million into that building, if we're just going to let it sit empty for the next 100 years, well, then it's a waste of money. But if we can get our return on our investment after we've built a new school and that now is more equitable to the community or whoever it is that wants to buy it, then really it's just buying time. And then we can keep those kids. That's just one way I'm looking at it, and I'm sorry if I'm throwing a wrench out there, but that's one way to keep those kids in that school while we still yet seek out funding for a new, I think both, in my opinion, and I know I'm probably like in a fairy tale dream world, but that's what I'd like to see happen. I'd like for us to look at the real cost of that return on that investment. I would like for us to look at people realizing we've got to get McDowell in a new structure. I think everybody sees that, but we can buy a little bit of time, I think. And I think we should propose it again to the county commission. If they haven't been aware of it, I think they definitely are now. That's my issue. And I'm also concerned about how it's going to disrupt not only the students at McDowell, but the students throughout the whole city of Columbia. Those are my legit concerns as a parent. And again, I understand the old country saying you can't get blood from a turnip. I know that's true, but I think maybe we can squeeze a little.
You know, when you sit in this seat, a lot of times you have to make a decision and set feelings aside, and you have to look at things objectively. And I think if we just listen to what Mr. Perriman tells us, and I don't think that he gave us any new revelation tonight. We know we need to get kids out of that building, period. We also know, if we look at things objectively, that if we were in the business of building a new school, if that's what we had decided to do, and that site that McDowell sits on currently, if that site sat vacant, we would not consider that at all. That is a at one time, I'm sure it was a good site for a school, but because of the way the city of Columbia has grown, you know, that school's been there 100 years. It's 100 years old this year. 100 years ago, it was probably great. In 2020, it's not a good site for a school. I'll go on record and say right now, I am in favor of building a new elementary school in the city limits of Columbia. I'm not in favor of building a school for 450 students, as Mayor Mulder alluded to, because of BEP funding. Until we hit that 660 student mark, we foot the bill on a lot of things, 100%. We get no BEP funding for that. So I am for building a school on a green site, a different site than McDowell's current site. But I think when you look at that, and when we're being told that that house is not safe, to use Mr. Perriman's words, it's incumbent upon us to get kids out of that building and for us to go to work to do everything we can to get a new building to house those kids in. I know that's not a popular opinion in this room tonight, but I think that's where we are. And Ms. Irwin, I appreciate your thoughts, but my fear is if we buy time and we go to the county commission and for whatever reason it doesn't get funded, how much time can we keep buying? And how, if it doesn't get funded this year, do we buy another year? And if it doesn't get funded the next year, do we buy another year, when we're saying tonight that we know kids don't need to be in that building? And not only that, I think if you go back to the work session, I was sitting in the back during that one, but I think Mr. Perriman got asked pretty point blank about his opinion of it, and his opinion was we shouldn't have had kids in that building for the last 3 or 4 years. So with that being said, I think that we have to get kids in a better building, in a safer building, and we need to direct our attention on getting a new elementary school in the city limits of Columbia.
Mr. Howe.
So, my biggest problem is the timeline. I'd like to see some adjustment in the timeline. September, I don't feel like right now we're approving to close it. I want to approve plans to move forward to see what's going on. And then furthermore, down in December, it shows where we approve a 5-year building and zoning plan. That sounds great, but I can approve a 5-year zoning plan tonight. And I can't guarantee you the county commission is going to fund $1 of it, because thus far, they have yet to fund any capital improvements for McDowell and Spring Hill beyond plans. They have not funded anything. So any illusion that we've diverted funds from a McDowell project is illusions. We have not diverted any funds. There's never been any funds to divert. So that's my biggest problem is I would like to see that this is not approving to close McDowell tonight, because I don't know that I can do that. I don't have a plan in place. I need to see what those look like. I need to see what those numbers are going to look like at Highland Park, at Riverside, at McDowell, or at Brown, or wherever these children are going to be pushed somewhere, and then those children are going to be pushed somewhere. I need to know what the big picture is. I can't just say, yep, we're closing it tonight. See you later, folks. I need to know what's going forward.
Got a couple questions and points. Oh, do you have your light on? Okay, go ahead.
I agree with Mr. Howell there, and that is the thing. We have to have a plan, and we heard some interesting things tonight. That is something to look at about the county rezoning, looking at where everything is involved to get to where we have to be. And I'm sorry, but I get so frustrated when I hear how much time do we have, how much time has already been. They've been in there. You know, they've been in there. It's like somebody enduring and making it and doing a good job, only tell them, you know, sorry, we thought this, but now you're going to be going, you know, all these places. We got to have a plan. If that, you know, we got to have a plan moving forward, because it was we talk about it now, but it was looking real great with the schematic design in 2018. You know, so somebody thought then that it was, you know, that it was workable and that kind of thing. Not trying to, you know, but we just got to have a plan. So these children are taken care of. The children, the staff, the teachers there. We need a plan, and I'm up for that. Like, you know, looking at the whole thing of moving forward with how to get everything in place, especially with the rezoning. If they got to be rezoned, because it's going to push in every way, and overcrowding, moving other students around and taking those students at McDowell to the other schools. And so we need to talk about that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my question. How will this affect the other schools? I know capacity-wise we've kind of batted around a lot of numbers, but
yeah,
hit me straight with it. What
well,
is
you
this
know,
gonna do?
we've talked in work sessions pretty directly about how this works and what you have to do when you rezone. Some of you were on the zoning task force the last time we did this. I will say, I'm happy to look at the whole county, but what I'm fearful that the city of Columbia may not like is that looking at the whole county may pull kids out of the city of Columbia and push them to the outer regions of the county where there are seats available. And we may be telling people who live in Columbia, you're now going to Santa Fe, or you need to go to Hampshire, or hey, you're headed to Culleoka. That's what, when you say, let's look at the whole thing, you got to take kids from where they are to where seats are. And seats aren't available necessarily in the small elementary schools in the city of Columbia. Seats are available in the big ones. Randolph-Howell's got a lot of seats. I told you that. Woodard's got seats. Randolph-Howell has a lot of seats. And we talked pretty extensively last work session about what that might look like. If you say we've got to pull kids to Randolph-Howell, the obvious neighborhood's Riverside, and there's a school sitting in Riverside. Then we have folks here tonight or the next night saying, what are you doing to my community? That's not a McDowell question, that's a Riverside question. The dominoes of zoning are much more than putting kids to the school that they're closest to. We don't do that currently. You know And I've said to you consistently, our number one seat issue in the county is high school. So as much as we're talking about McDowell tonight, we have a real high school seat issue that has to be addressed. That means that somewhere at Spring Hill High School or somewhere else, we have to create seats for high school kids that are pretty immediate. We can absorb the students from McDowell. I don't like that statement, okay? I'm talking to you in hard numbers. Mr. Lindsay said sometimes when you sit where you sit, you have to look at things objectively. Believe me, I'm looking at things really objectively when we look at schools. And I'm leaving emotion way out of this. We've got to look at high school seats first. You have to. Then the next thing is, we have seats available in some other place. We've got a lot of seats available at middle school right now. Do you want to send a fourth grade to middle school? That's probably not a conversation we want to have. But as we start looking at zoning and seating, those are realistic things. If we look at the whole district, then we start looking at the city of Columbia. You ask straightforwardly, what does this do? I'll give you the example that I gave you last time. McDowell sits in the center of the city of Columbia elementary zones. Obviously, if you remove that school, those students have to go somewhere. They go from the underpass at School Street, around Rolling Fields, around the CA campus, they take in Macedonia, they go around South High, and they come back downtown. That's the zone right now, okay? If you remove that school, obviously the natural thing is for those kids to push outward. You can look at a map and see which schools are the ones that they push outward to. The problem there that we do have is that we have small schools. Those schools that they push outward to are at capacity, which dominoes that we have to push those students outward to the two schools I mentioned. The two City of Columbia schools that have seats are Woodard and Howell. There's no way around it. Howell's sitting at 62% capacity. We have a relatively new school compared to the others that's very technologically capable that's sitting almost half empty. So when you remove that school, the straightforward is there's a domino. It affects everybody in some way. It may not get everyone. I mean, you may not leave your school, but someone at that school is leaving to go to another school, and that's the straightforward. If we say the county and you push outward, then City of Columbia may push to some of those outlying regions.
Okay, let me ask you a couple other questions. Thank you for sharing that. I've heard a lot of, within 30 seconds, tell me what dangers that physical facility poses. Are bats still in it? No. Mr. Perriman, I think
not in the recent weeks, no. But we had bats after we talked about bats. Yes, we've had bats after we talked about.
I heard that every county commission meeting I went to.
We've had bats after the last conversation that was officially bats. We have a lot of lead. We have asbestos. We are not ADA compliant. There's not a doorway in that building that is ADA compliant. So if we go in to start working, we have lots of things to address. We have an HVAC system that's about to fail. We've talked to you about that. Pretty imminent, we feel, on the chiller, and then the boiler within the next year. Is it safe to be in short spurts? Yeah. Would I want to live in it every day? No. I know they love it. I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about taking their school, and I know that the outcome of the conversation is that's what happens. But I'm talking to you about a physical plant. We unload students on the street. We don't do that anywhere else. We take them into a two-story building that does not have an elevator. We do not have adequate routes of safety away from the school. If you go out the front, you're on West 7th. So there are several things to apply to that, but we do have a potentially ongoing rodent problem. And I will say that we probably feel that the cleanup in the ceilings, there's no way that everything was gotten out of those ceilings that would be some sort of danger. But we have lead, we have asbestos, we have lots of things that we're hoping we don't have to deal with.
We have lead, we have asbestos, we've had flying rodents. We've had other dangers. The physical school is what we're talking about, the physical building. That is not, could we not face some sort of liability? That's what I think we have to consider.
It is a two-story building that is not sprinkled. And by code, it does not have to be sprinkled because it was built prior to that code. However, kind of like Mr. Lindsay said, if that was a vacant lot, would you look to build there? Would we ever look to be into a two-story building that's not
Here,
sprinkled?
let me ask my last question, because I see here twice on the timeline discussion of a 5-year building and zoning plan. Do you foresee that discussion being able to put into that plan a new facility? Not at that site, but perhaps somewhere else?
In the next 5 years, yes.
Okay. So what I'm inclined to do is I'm like Mr. Howell. I don't want to do this haphazardly without a plan. But I don't know that I could ask a parent to send their child to school with lead and asbestos. So the physical facility, I think, is what it is. But I do think we need to have a plan to present to the county commission, not just, hey, now we've closed the school, can we get more money to do something else? We need to have a comprehensive 5-year plan that includes growth, that includes new facilities, and is well thought out. Because, you know, I think we found that a lot of times we do things off of our knee-jerk reaction and maybe somebody telling us something we wanted to hear. I think that's maybe how the discussion of funds being allocated, we might have been told something we wanted to hear. But I do think that we would be leaving a gap in our city. But that gap is going to happen when that building falls in. So I do think we need to be proactive, and if that means moving forward with this timeline, with the assumption that this 5-year plan is going to include facilities, then I would think about it a little bit more.
Can I say one thing? And I'm not proving my point here, but I do want everybody to be real clear on this. And Mr. Luconen, you can correct me if I'm wrong. If we went to the commission today, they don't fund until the springtime. They can't fund anything.
We wouldn't be looking at any kind of funds till
But I know that folks
fall.
are saying go back to them. The earliest we could get spring funds would be maybe this time next fall. And as I point out that $6 million number, I just go back to say that needs to be done by this time next fall. So they can't give us those funds until the spring at the earliest, and that depends on when you guys and they come to a consensus on what a budget looks like, and every other department comes to a consensus on what a budget looks like, and we hope the sheriff doesn't hold out and demand more money, and then their budget goes through. And so I don't say that to belabor the point, but it's not the simple just ask them and this is going to be okay, because if we don't get funds to this time next year and we have to say, okay, we're going to do our planning, we're going to vet out, we're going to bid out this project, that's the fall of 21. You may be looking to 23 for some sort of fix or some sort of new building. And I just can't, in good conscience, say to you, that's okay to stay there for 2 more years, when I've told you, and Mr. Breeden before said, we need to get out. And again, that's not belaboring the point. That's just saying the reality of it is, it's not just going tonight and or next week and they go, oh yeah, sure, you can have the money and fix it. The process is one that is lengthy. And again, the timeline that we brought was what we felt like we were asked to bring, and you notice that first wording says discontinued use of the physical plant. I'm not asking, I'm just saying if you don't like that down the road, this is the timeline, you're approving the timeline, you can make that call at any point. We want to stay, we don't want to stay. But if you ask me in December, those issues are still going to be the issues that we face after we've talked about everything else.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Irvin?
I'm sorry, I'm so difficult, and you have to forgive my ignorance. I feel like I'm so far behind, but I do want to advocate well for this, and that's what I'm trying to do. So you're saying that if we vote to approve this plan, that we don't necessarily have to be out June 21, that's just a plan? This can come up on the agenda again?
I was asked to bring an accelerated timeline. If you approve the timeline, you still make the I'm not telling y'all what to do, you make the decisions on when you're gonna do what, and what funding you're gonna ask for or where we go. What this does put into place is that we're committing on this timeline that by the end of November into December, we're gonna have talked about what are we doing with those students. We're gonna have talked about how this looks in the city of Columbia. And I want to just say again, I've been real clear for a couple of months now. This is I said one time, maybe the hardest decision in this isn't necessarily the decision tonight. It's the decision with what do you do with everyone else in Columbia when suddenly Highland people may be upset with you, or brown folks may be upset with you, or people from Woodard may go, wait, we don't like this plan that you're coming in. And this becomes an element of that larger plan, but no ma'am, you guys are the drivers in this. I brought the timeline we were asked to bring.
That's why I don't feel comfortable, like you say, it's because there's so many unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, I understand if we can't go until spring, I get that, but I think we need to be, first things I've heard from stakeholders is that we do not want to be surprised, and we want to give our people hope. And I think we need to I would like to see this not be a closure, but be a continuation of hope that we're going to fight for them. And if that is, we're going to have these talks with our county commissioners. I mean, and like you say, we're not a funding body. I want to re-stress that, and that's what makes it hard, is we're not a funding body, but we are advocates, and I don't want to just roll over on this. But I mean, I understand if it's looking at it, but I also want to make sure that it's clear that this is just a plan on what we're going to do, because I don't want to close McDowell under these pretenses, because I don't know what's going to happen to these children. And I think that if we close it as is, this is just my opinion, and we cram these kids full into all these other schools, well then I feel like, Columbia's first of all, Spring Hill High School is they're not in my district, but some of the kids feed into my district, and Spring Hill High School I'm just as passionate about. So I agree we need to have those two talks, the high school, but also City of Columbia is growing, and I know you know this, I'm just saying this for the people that are here who think that we're not transparent. We need another elementary school, and I would just like to know when we can get that, and I'd like to have those real talks come spring so we know then what we're doing, and that's, because if we knew what we were doing, we'd feel better, I'd feel better about it, so.
Yes, and again, that's why that 5-year plan is in there, for you to lay out to folks to say this is what our planning is.
Mr. Howell. And actually, she pretty much said most of what I was going to say. That I want to hit on the main thing there is that we are not the funding body. We can make a plan right now and say we're building 3 new schools today. We don't have the money. We have to go with our hat in hand to county commission and say, this is what we need. And they vote it up or they vote it down. Thus far, they voted it down the last 3 years that I'm aware of. Ms. Kincher says 4. So it's, regardless of what we decide tonight, December, if we vote to continue this project, it's out of we can't do anything without their funding. Plain and simple. The sales tax referendum, hey, that's great. So, the board didn't vote on that. That wasn't a boardroom deal. That was not the board that voted for that. We voted to support that. That's great. That was not a board decision, a board idea. That was concocted between county mayors and our former director of schools. So that money, we don't, that's not our money. We don't see that money. That's all in the hands of the county commission. So I just want to make that clear.
Mr. Lindsey. If we never get started, we'll never get anywhere. And that's a real simple statement, but we can sit here tonight and say we're going to wait till we get a 5-year plan, And we can wait and we can present that to the county commission. I've sat through many years of budget meetings at the county commission, and sometimes those things go into June and July and August and sometimes September. But what I've heard two different people say here tonight, and as I've read social media, the reoccurring theme is people just don't want to be surprised. And if we say we're going to wait on this 5-year plan and we present that to the county commission, and I'm not trying to do their job, I don't want their job, but if we kick this around and it goes to June or July and they don't vote for a tax increase to fund this school, are we going to sit here in July and tell stakeholders we're not opening that school in August? That's unfair to those guys. That's unfair to everybody. That's unfair to staff. That's unfair to teachers. Again, going back, we know we probably didn't need to open McDowell this year, just when we get right down to the nuts and bolts of it. So we know we don't need to open it in another year. So we can work this plan, and at any time, if somebody hits the lottery and they want to hand the county, $50 million and we can rebuild McDowell, nobody in this room will have a problem if we reverse that course. But if we keep stringing people along, and if you look, I don't know how many people saw, but Metro Public Schools in Davidson County this year closed either 2 or 3 schools in July. And I don't know the circumstances behind that, so I'm not condemning those guys for it, but that's tough on those parents, and that's tough on a lot of people. I think we need to get started with this, and again, if something wonderful happens, we can always change course, but I think we need to work the plan as if we are not going to put those kids back in that building for another year.
Ms. Irvin.
I'm sorry, I've got one more question, just because I want to make sure I'm getting all the facts. We talk about asbestos, which sounds super scary, and we talk about all the other potential hazards. Is McDowell the only school in this district that has that, or are there other schools in this district that have asbestos and lead-based paint? Because to my understanding, lead-based paint, anything built in the 70s or prior could have that.
Turn your light on.
Sorry. I think it may have done. There we are. We just encapsulated the hallways at Withorn during this COVID scare. Now that we have those encapsulated to where the state says that it is not a danger anymore, it is the largest holder. If it were just the asbestos alone, it wouldn't be an issue. If it were just the lead-based paint alone, it wouldn't be an issue. It's the culmination of all of those things. And so that I don't keep interrupting, but just let me say as well, because I pulled it up. Please remember that outside of the $24 million budget we sent for McDowell to the commission this year, we sent $43 million for Spring Hill High School. We sent $25.674 million in repairs that we know are imminent for other schools in our district. Other existing schools, $25.674 million. We asked for $1.2 million in buses, and we got $600,000 worth of buses. That $25 million that is imminent at these other schools is still part of this conversation. I know we're focused on McDowell tonight, but your number one seat need is in high schools, and we got $25 million that doesn't go away. I'm not saying that to promote. I'm saying that as a responsibility to you, as someone who has to come back to you and stand before you in the future and say, we need $2.8 million for Santa Fe. We know that. We stress that. Mr. Lukonen fought the last night for that, and we got nothing. That didn't go away. And that's just part of my reminder to you that as we sit down and look across this district, those imminent costs and those failings of systems and things only go up for the other 22 sites that we have as well. So I know that that's not to pull attention away from McDowell, but this is part of a large conversation that is beyond specifically just that.
Mr. Sims.
Just a little off track. Doug, what is the borrowing power that we gained from the tax referendum? I mean, if we were to go to the county commission today and ask for funding for a new McDowell or for funding for whatever, what are we looking at?
Due to the budget and budgeting for COVID, money was moved away from the debt service fund to take care of the 101 fund and general operating budgets. So we estimated originally when we first looked at doing the sales tax referendum that it would bring $3.6 million into schools, basically to pay for school indebtedness, which is current, past, and future borrowings. That revenue is on track to project and hit $4.5 million this year. So with that said, though, they budgeted a large deficit in the 151 fund to offset that revenue that would come in. So even if it does hit $4.5 million, the debt service fund is only going to run a deficit, so it's going to lose money of $400,000. So the borrowing capacity is zero unless the county decides to move revenue to the debt service fund. That will then create debt capacity and funds could be borrowed. And they don't have the ability to move revenue until they go through a new budget year, a new budget set of budget meetings and approve a 2021-2022 budget.
So, as I thought I heard someone in the public delegation speak, that money has been allocated is not correct.
That's correct.
So you're saying to safely reopen the school August of 21, we're looking at roughly $6 million.
We brought you the EMG report last month. That is the renewal of your 5-year report that I said to you, this is a report that this board has trusted over the last 5 years to be valid and to show that the things that they brought to us have been correct. Their numbers to us were $5.925 million the first year. Now, having worked with EMG numbers in the past, we know that there have been some projects that they said would cost X amount, and we were able to do that for less. However, we know that probably equally there were projects that they said cost X amount that ended up costing us more. So that 592 is probably a realistic number when you combine everything together. So that was their immediate need was that number. I say 6, but it's really 5.925, something like that.
Yeah. So your professional opinion, I assume Mr. Hall's professional opinion, is if that school is unsafe for kids, I have a hard time to put kids in an unsafe school. Do we have any other schools that are unsafe in y'all's opinion?
No, not building wide. And I will say this, I want to say this. When we sat down as an operations team and we said who thinks we should stay at McDowell, there was no one that says that we stay. And I will draw you back to 2 years ago. That community told you this building was unsafe. Not me. The people who are now telling you leave it alone, and I'm not talking about the folks in the room, okay? But folks that came on behalf of McDowell 2 years ago were the ones that told you it was unsafe. And they told you that Spring Hill High School was unsafe. But that community said that. That was what Mr. Breeden said to, at that point, not to throw shade, it wasn't what someone wanted, so like we said, there may have been some sort of deal that was, now you're dealing with it. But, and that's just the straightforward truth of the matter, is that everyone knew 2 or 3 years ago this needed to happen. Somebody didn't want it to happen, it didn't, and now you're dealing with it. And, you know, I say it what I think, and that's what we're dealing with, and it's a mess. But, no, when I asked the operations team, from safety to Mr. Hall, to maintenance, to tech, to food services, everyone in the room said, we need out now.
Thank you. So, just last thing. So if we, unless we, this is just my thinking, unless we approve a $6 million fund balance allocation to make repairs or make repairs just to make it safe for next year, you don't think we need to put kids back in it?
No,
that's what we're looking at. We either need to vote to not have kids, or make a vote to allocate $6 million for repairs.
And we've consistently said, no, they don't need to be there. And then I would defer again and say, I know we used the 11-something million earlier, but do they have $6 million right now they could divert to McDowell?
We wouldn't have any money to do anything else. Run payroll, pay our bills. That would be too much. In fund balance for the schools.
Okay, I see another light. Mr. Hooper.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems like it's, I don't want to say simple, because that kind of demeans the situation, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like anybody here or anyone I've ever talked to is saying to keep the kids in the school this year, let alone put them back in there next year. I mean, is that wrong? I mean, because to me that seems simple. What's the point in making a plan beforehand if there was never an intention to keep the kids in this school building? So I mean, I've heard the phrase, you know, put the wagon before the horse. That doesn't even apply, I don't believe, because there really shouldn't even be a horse or a wagon in this case. The kids shouldn't be in that school. They need to be in a different building, and it's our job to make sure we can get them in a building that's going to be safe, which we know the other ones are way safer than this one. So, I mean, I don't understand the objections on any level, because we can't give $6 million out of the fund balance, because we got the rest of the county that we got to do it. We got to do our actual employees. We got everyone else we have to take care of. And $6 million on one school, I mean, it's not fair to anybody in the county, let alone this actual school itself. Because, I mean, there are teachers at that school too that need to be paid, and if we can't process payroll, that's not going to happen. And we're not going to get the money from the county commissioner in time, so they're going to be back in that school if we don't close it. And no one here is going to say that those kids need to be in the school. And I mean, so that doesn't make any sense. So if somebody will come out and say that, you know, the school's safe enough for kids to be in there this year or next year, then that's a different question. But I mean, if no one's going to say that, then I don't understand what the conversation is.
Seeing no more lights, I just want to add 2 final thoughts to this conversation. The county commission allocated a huge amount of money several years back based off of the EMG report of maintenance and upkeep of schools. And the reason for that was because there was a plan. When we sit down to do this plan in October, November, December, as on the timeline, I want to see it take the shape of that EMG report. Elements brought in, and then we add our own based off the growth. Otherwise, I would have no problem with making a motion, if that plan is not adequate, of rescinding this timeline and spending that $6 million. If we don't have a comprehensive plan, that's the thing about, everybody talks about going to the county commission, they're not going to give us money, this, that, and another. I was on the county commission. I know that money can be gained. We have to have all our ducks in a row. We have to have a comprehensive plan, and we have to make sure that we're giving accurate information, because that is not what's been done as of recent. So those are my final thoughts on this. We do have a motion and a second on the floor, so at this time, we will vote. Do what? Did you have your light on? Okay, I believe the vote is, what did it come out to be? I was a little distracted. 10, okay. So we do have a timeline. We have not necessarily done anything other than approve a timeline at this point. Moving on to policies.
Can I ask one point of clarification?
Yes, you may.
With that timeline, I'm going to, with your permission, put just an open agenda item on the work session that just talks about scheduling whatever meetings you wish to have to be part of the planning in October and November, because it does call for us to start that zoning work and those types of things. Also, the last time we did zoning, we were directed to use a task force. Before that, in past times, we had not done that before, and I need direction from this body as to how you wish for us to move forward. Do you want to be the task force with us? Do you want us to do it, or I want direct? And so I'm going to put that on there with your permission,
do that.
Chairman.
Let's not make things more difficult than they have to be.
Okay, but I'm
It's
just
kind of my take on everything.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to have any comment? I agree with the timeline. Okay, good point. All right, policies under 5. We have number 1, policies.
Motion to approve and waive the 30-day posting.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the change in our policy that moves meetings from Monday, the first Monday, to the first Tuesday, and then move our work session from the third Monday to the third Tuesday. And this will need to be a 2/3 vote.
And waive the policy for 30-day posting.
Waiving the policy for 30-day posting as well. Just as a matter of information, the logic behind this is that it makes it, well, impossible to be at county commission meetings to advocate for the things that we're proposing if we're meeting at the same exact time as the county commission. So we are doing this hopefully to be able to advocate stronger on behalf of the students of Murray County. Mr. Lindsay.
Just a quick question, kind of along these lines. If we go by the letter of the law of that, we'll actually be meeting again next Tuesday. And I was just curious if that gives staff enough time to even prepare to do anything, or should we bump that?
Let me comment on that, because Shirley and I looked at things, and one of the things as the board chairman, as Mr. Fulbright would learn, is when there's a holiday or something, you can change it and do something. We thought about going on the 1st, that would have been the first Tuesday, but we hadn't waived the policy. There needed to be a 2-week break, so it's the 22nd, isn't it, Shirley, for the work session, which gives you 2 weeks. Then we turn around and have fall break, so we had to push that over past that, and then there is a short time for that work session, so it's, on the 18th, so that's why it is. We do have a 2-week turnaround this month, because we would have met the 15th, but the policy allowed us, because of a holiday, to reschedule it.
So bottom line, we're not meeting next Tuesday.
No.
Correct. Our next meeting will be a work session, September 22nd. If this passes. Week before my birthday, if anybody wants to write that in their calendar. Director Hickman.
And let me say, not telling you which one to pick, but we can be ready for next week. One of the reasons we wanted to go ahead, if you wanted to go next week, is because next week is also the budget meeting for the commission.
the budget meeting, wait a minute, I'm not following you here. County Commission budget meeting is the 14th,
which is a Monday.
and then we would meet the 5th.
Yeah, so it's the day after, but we can be ready if you guys, so it's up to you. Because when the calendar we saw first was posted, we went ahead and started getting our ducks in a row. If you did want to do the budget meeting next week, the work session. So I don't want you to feel like you're doing it because you want us to have enough time to get it together for next, but that's up to you if you want to meet next week or wait till the 22nd.
If we've already set it for the 22nd, I'm fine with leaving it the 22nd.
If we have to vote on the CLP, it may be good to have it on the 15th. That way we can have a special called meeting after that to vote on something if we need to vote on something. Because the 18th was the deadline?
It probably still wouldn't meet budget now, because the budget will be Monday, this Monday.
Yeah,
So regardless if
before
we-
that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
But the CLP is what I'm talking about, not
Right,
budget.
even if we voted on the CLP the 15th, the next Tuesday, it still has to go through the budget, and the budget is Monday, so we'd be voting on it a day later.
But for us to send it to the state, it doesn't have to go through the budget.
The what?
For it to go through the state, it doesn't have to go through the budget.
No, but if,
I'm not worried about ordering devices, I'm just worried about getting the CLP in.
if we vote on it
For the deadline.
22nd, we still would have it in. We may miss that grant deadline, but we're gonna work.
Well, that's what I'm,
Yeah,
okay.
Ms. Kinzer?
Oh.
Your lights on.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm getting used to turning it off.
Mr. Hickman, any other thoughts?
Scott, do you wanna speak?
We had asked the state about if as long as it hadn't substantially changed in our CLP, that we even have to bring it back. And so they haven't gotten back to us. So once they do, if we could possibly maybe just do a special call meeting just to approve the CLP if we need to bring it back to you guys to be changed. But there's been some change of language, but not a substantial change to the CLP. And that's one of the questions we asked when we received it back was that process that we have to, and they were still researching that. Because they know also there's not a lot of substantial change that we had to make.
And also believe through the governor's orders, if I'm correct, we can still, if we need to do a special call, we can do it virtually if we need to, just for that. Am I correct on that?
Okay, so we are looking at changing the policy from the first Monday to the first Tuesday, and the third Monday to the third Tuesday. This month, our regular meetings will be, the 8th, obviously, we're meeting tonight. And then our work session will be the 22nd of September. We are waiving the 30-day notice policy as well with this motion. Seeing no other lights, we will vote. Miss, yes.
Ms. Parker.
Looks like it's a unanimous vote. Mr. Perriman, give the
Mr.
floor.
Fulbright, we just wanted to make note, when Mr. Hickman mentioned the budget meeting next week with the commission, you guys asked us last month to schedule a time with them to have the EMG presentation made to the commission, and that was the date that they gave us. So Mr. Hall and I, along with the representative that came and made that presentation to you last month, we are going to the meeting on the 14th.
Okay.
When he said that spurred my memory. I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew we were gonna be there on your behalf.
Good, that sounds great, and if anybody would like to attend, the budget meetings are always a blast. Feel free to do so. Next item on our agenda, resolution of the testing moratorium. I have a motion from Mr. Moore, second from Mr. Howell. Obviously, they're the ones in my line of sight from this angle. Would you like to say anything about this or briefly discuss?
what this is because of the disruption in education this year for all the students, what the districts are doing is we are all collaborating with our board members to have a resolution that comes from Murray County and there in kind to say that we do feel like they need to hold another no harm to teachers again this year for testing if they do decide to do testing, which Ms. DeVos federally has said that there will be testing. So at that point, that's all this resolution is saying is we think it should be held no harm to teachers.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lindsay.
Who produced this document?
This was tough.
I guess the only objection I have to it, personally, I think that testing needs to be done so we can find out exactly where we are. I agree with the part that maybe we shouldn't hold people accountable for that, but I think I have a problem passing this, asking state lawmakers to do away with testing. That's the only issue I have, because we didn't test last year, so and then if we skip it this year, we've gone 2 years and we really don't know where we fall there. So that's a problem I have with it.
I'm sorry, I must have misread it. What I understand it to say is if they do decide to have testing, that they hold it as no harm, because right now our legislative body is talking about not even having it. And I agree with you. I think if given the option, we do need to find out where our students are. It gives us good assessment data.
Well, that last paragraph says supports and respectfully request a moratorium on state standardized testing and accountability. So that one sentence is what I have a problem with.
Okay. And we can strike that word if you guys would like.
Mr. Moore.
If I could address that, because that's a concern I have as well. What my intention would be that would be in regards to state testing. I would be absolutely looking for Mr. Hickman to make sure that inside our district that we are testing for assessment levels, which I believe we've already started doing to try to find out where we kind of fell behind in the spring. And I would expect, I see head shaking, that we would continue that, that we would be able to focus on internal testing where we know where our children are and not be focusing on these state tests. That's how I'm reading that. I'm not sure how you're wanting to look at it, but that's how I'm seeing it.
And you are correct. If we're given the opportunity, I agree we should test, but however, we should hold no harm to the students. But
Mr. Howe. Oh, sorry, were you? Mr. Howe.
Well, I mean, if we're not willing to use this data for anything other than, to hold our teachers accountable, I don't know how good the data is going to be. There is a huge disruption, and I don't know how this would really be necessarily useful data. I feel like our internal data or internal testing would probably show better results, or at least I'm hoping it does.
Ms. Parker.
I agree with Mr. Howe that there have been disruptions. The disruptions have been statewide. So everybody's in the same boat, I feel like, as far as that goes. I'm not necessarily comfortable with just using our internal data because we have seen people use that and manipulate that data in ways that make it misleading to our board. So I think it's important that we do use the state testing personally. I mean, let's be real, we're in the in-need category. We really need to get out of that, in all honesty. We need to take this test, and we need to be in a different category. So, to me, we should be putting a premium on this testing. I'm not saying teach the test or anything like that, but I'm saying I want us to test, because I want us to be out of that in-need category, like, yesterday.
Mr. Howe.
I don't think we are in the same boat. And this is the reason why. Murray County has done something different than some of our surrounding counties. Some of our surrounding counties have said, nope, we're all remote. Well, our data and their data aren't apples to apples because we're not doing all remote. You know, we're doing in-person and remote. And there are some counties doing A and B schedule. I don't know that our data compared to Williamson County or Lawrence County or Giles County is relevant, because we're all implementing this differently. Any number, any data can be misrepresented one way or the other, state data included. So, I don't know that we are in the same boat. I don't know that the data would be relevant this year. I don't know that it will show us a true representation of where our children are or were or could be.
I think each county is having to make a decision based off of, you know, what their current state is. I mean, obviously, when we stopped having kids coming to school in March, there was a lot of learning that did not take place during that time that other counties did pick up and did, you know, cover gaps. Hopefully with us choosing to go in person and have the option of doing remote, that's us trying to address those gaps. Everybody's situation is somewhat different, but every county has to assess how they're going to deal with the same set of facts. I mean, we all have a little bit different budgets, we all have a little bit different needs for our students, but in general, I just think we need to get an accurate picture. And I've been on this board for 6 years, and it seems like more times than not, we don't have really good, reliable state data, and we need to put the onus on the state to get their act together, just like they're putting the onus on us with a CLP and the education that we are having to provide our students. I mean, we all need to be rowing in the same direction, I feel like, on this.
Ms. Irvin.
So, if I'm hearing this correct, this is basically just kind of removing the teacher liability portion of this, correct? Or no, is this totally doing away with the test and all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, it's, this right here is not doing anything. It's just showing that our district supports not holding our teachers accountable.
That's what I thought.
And, yeah, we don't have the right to do that or not. We can't make that policy or procedure. That is from the state, which is driven by the federal. And the federal has already came out and taken the position that we are going to test this year. All states are. However, we want to make sure that our voices are heard if they are going to test, you know, for the same reasons all of you are speaking, is we shouldn't hold the teachers accountable because of all of the different apples to oranges or disruption in learning. That's what we're trying to come together as a coalition and say, you know, this year being the year it has been or will be, that we really need to make sure that our legislature does the right thing and says we're not going to hold teachers accountable for these scores this year. Now, with that said, I do want to make one comment, though, and as I look out, I'm seeing a principal and a teacher, several teachers, and the point I want to make is, regardless if this counts or not, I will tell you right now, principals and teachers are going to want their students to do the best on this, just because they want that reliable data. Even if they knew right now there would be no accountability, I guarantee you, looking at, especially the principal I'm looking at right there, that she would want her kids to do the best they could so she can have that reliable data to know what her kids need for the previous years. And so I think even though it's apples to oranges or however you look at it, they're going to know it doesn't count. You know, they take pride in this, regardless if it counts or not. They really do. And I'm sorry if I'm speaking for you.
Well, that's why I thought it was a no-brainer, because, look, being a former teacher, I look at it as either we rock it, because we're here every day, where some counties are not, and, you know, that counts for something, or we bomb it, and then the next year we build it up, and then we have the growth. So, I mean, I think, I agree personally with the teacher waiver, but I think, yeah, but you're saying the testing's going to take place regardless, so.
Okay, the motion on the floor, Mr. Lindsey.
I'm not trying to be argumentative, but that's not what that document says. That document says we will not test. And it says a moratorium on state standardized testing. That's what it says. And if that's in there, I can't vote for it. I don't have a problem taking the accountability side of it away from the teachers, but that's not what, that may be what it was intended to say, but what it says is there's a moratorium on state standardized testing.
we can do a couple things with this. We can remove that language and then revisit this at a work session, or we can vote on it now, realizing that we are not either making tests or holding people accountable. We're just expressing a view of what we think should be done. And that's where we're coming at this. Mr. Moore.
I can make this real easy. Keep in mind, this is just a resolution asking the state to do something. It carries zero weight other than what we think. Now, obviously, if the board is divided on this, I will gladly withdraw my motion in the first place, and we can send this back to the work session. And if we want to refine the language at that point, we can do that and come forward as a board with something we are agreeing to.
My question, maybe you can answer this. That paragraph starts out, now therefore be it resolved unanimously on the whatever day of September. If we have if we pass it with two people voting no, that's kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. And is this one of those things that came up in between the work session and now?
Yeah, just withdraw motion back.
Okay, we have a withdrawal of the motion. Mr. Howell, would you like to withdraw your second? We will move this to the work session. The legislature meets in January, so as long as we have something pulled together. Well, yeah, they, all that. Number 7, athletics, GMP, Hewlett-Spencer change. I see Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Spencer. So could we,
No, I can
Pointer?
speak. Yeah, I can speak on that. It's not really a change. It's really an addition. You see my comments that should be attached in the board information. Basically, what happened was when I presented this information to the school board earlier this calendar year, we presented on the Santa Fe project itself, along with all the projects in the $500,000 in total that was being allocated. During that time, it was also mentioned about the $35,000 in EMG dollars that had been allocated for Santa Fe over the last 3 years. Given the presentation, given the approval, it was my understanding, me individually understood that all of that in totality was approved and that we could move forward with the project. When we got ready to draw the monies down is when I was informed at that time that the $35,000 in EMG was not necessarily just a pot of money that we had just waiting to be spent on Santa Fe. It had to be drawn down the proper way. It also had to have board approval. So what should have actually happened was the GMP should have been at $535,000. Instead, it was at only $500,000, but we're also asking for a separate GMP just for the EMG dollars of Santa Fe for the $35,000. So once I found that out, spoke with Hewlett Spencer, also spoke with Bill Marbert. We stopped what work was left remaining to do, and now bringing it before the board. But all of that error in understanding is all on me regarding the $35,000, because I didn't understand how the money worked until I got ready to draw it down, and then was brought to speed on how it actually should happen.
We've got a motion to approve from from Ms. Parker. Second from Mr. Howell. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. We have a unanimous passage of the GMP. Thank you both for sitting here all night. You guys are always troopers. Other business, instructional low bids, no, nothing on that one. We have a motion to adjourn. Do we need to include, we still need to include our attorney-client within this meeting, correct? Before we adjourn. Okay, so we have, thank you. We have an attorney-client meeting. Our regular business has been concluded, but we will not adjourn our meeting yet.